Black Friday sale is going on now. Save 20% off all Everyone Loves Guitar merchandise at guitarmerch.com. Just use the discount code GOBBLE20, and while you're there, check out all the new t-shirt and hoodie designs in the store. Guitarmerch.com, 20% off Everyone Loves Guitar merchandise. Discount code GOBBLE20. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber. Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar. We have Mark Whitfield with us. He's one of my New York homies, so this will be a fun conversation. Quick thumbnail sketch. He's a seasoned New York City jazz guitarist with a very long, successful solo career, even though he looks like he's about 25. As a sideman, he's played with legendary artists, including Dizzy Gillespie, Art Blakey, Quincy Jones, Ray Charles, Herbie Hancock, Gladys Knight, Burt Bacharach, Jimmy Smith, Clark Terry, Shirley Horn, Wynton and Branford Marsalis, Joe Williams, Chris Botti, Stanley Turrentine, and his mentor, Mark's mentor, the great George Benson. Mark's released 16 solo albums, and he's played as a sideman on albums with artists like Sting, Steven Tyler, D'Angelo, Mary J. Blige, John Mayer, Chaka Khan, sorry about that, Jill Scott, Diana Krall, Christian McBride, Chris Botti. Man, you don't play. These are serious names. Roy Hargrove, Joe Zawinul, Nicholas Payton, and Robert Glasper. Mark is also a very active instructor and puts on master classes. And he's teaching now in Jersey?
Yes, at NJCU, New Jersey City University.
Very
right
cool.
Here in Jersey City.
Very cool. Well, thanks for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And I should also thank Kat Dyson, because I saw Mark. This guy has a smile. He lights up a room. And I was looking at Kat's Instagram one day, and I saw this guy with this big smile. I'm like, who the hell is this dude? He just looks so happy. I just wanted to hang out with him just because he looks so happy. And then I checked him out and I saw his credentials, listened to his music, and I'm like, okay, let's do this. So thank you, Kat.
Shout out to Kat. Hey.
For sure. All right. You graduated from Berklee. I was curious what prompted you to go there as opposed to any other music school, and what were you doing musically before you went up there?
So I started out playing the bass. I'm classically trained, right? And I grew up on Long Island. My parents retired to Seattle, Washington for what would have been my junior year of high school. And that actually became my first opportunity to play guitar in the high school jazz band, because the school I went to on Long Island, there was a guitarist by the name of Teddy Castellucci, who, I don't know if you know Teddy, but one of his many credits is he does all of Adam Sandler's film scores.
Oh,
wow. If you remember the movie The Wedding Singer,
sure.
There's a guitar player in the band on screen. That's Teddy. We went to high school together.
Where is this on the island?
Lindenhurst, Long Island.
Okay.
And I was getting a kick out of seeing that, because that's actually how Teddy looked when we went to school. We went to school in the 70s. The mullet, the whole thing. I was like, wow, I wonder if he had any of those clothes left over from school. Anyway, he's a wonderful guitarist, and he was already playing professionally as a sophomore, senior, junior in high school. And he was a few years older than me, so I never got a shot to play there. We moved to Seattle. And my high school band went to a Berklee College of Music sponsored high school jazz band competition. And I won an Outstanding Soloist Award in the form of a monetary, scholarship. And I convinced my parents to let me give it a shot. I had a scholarship to go to Georgetown University. I was going to enroll in a pre-med program. I'm the only musician in my family. One of my brothers had gone to Georgetown, undergrad in Georgetown Law, and I had gone there for a summer program and had a great time. But I was falling in love with guitar, and I got a shot to play it in the band. And once I got to Berklee, I was 16. And you got to remember, to study jazz at an internationally acclaimed school in 1983 when I started, there weren't that many choices. You could go to there was no jazz program at Juilliard. Manhattan School of Music didn't have a jazz program at that time. The new school was just probably just starting, and I didn't have any family in the city at that point, in New York City. So my parents weren't going to turn me loose on Manhattan at 16. We had some family in the Boston area, and I hadn't even heard of North Texas, which was more of a big band school at that time. So I wasn't really aware of it until later. So my father tried to bribe me '66 Mustang if I would stay in Seattle and go to the University of Washington.
That's a good. Wow. So
almost got me, but Berklee went out for sure.
So I have a bunch of questions. You said you're the only musician in your family, but you're a classical trained bassist. That doesn't happen overnight. I'm assuming you did that. You studied young. Were they encouraging of your musical?
Sure. My parents were great appreciators of all the arts. We used to come in to see Broadway shows all the time, and they were big jazz fans. My father was born in 1920, and my mother was born in 1923. So jazz was their music.
Wow. Okay.
I'm the youngest of an older family. And so even though we lived on the island, my father, he grew up in Harlem. He tells me stories of, he used to tell me stories all the time of sitting in the front row at amateur night at the Apollo every week. He was there when Ella Fitzgerald won.
That's
so
crazy, man.
Yeah, his idea of amateur night at the Apollo was not, the Sandman coming out with the hook, dragging off a horrible singer. It was someone like Ella Fitzgerald. He saw Sammy Davis there with his father, So when I was a kid, they used to take me to a place called the Westbury Music Hall. The theater.
Sure. Yeah, I know.
I saw tons of concerts. I mean, I saw the Ellington Orchestra there. I saw Count Basie. I saw Ella Fitzgerald. I even saw Joe Pastor. I saw lots of great music as a kid, and so my parents made sure that I had a great appreciation for the music that they loved, and also. I went to a great public high school. I was part of a great public school system on Long Island at the time. And we chose instruments I chose the alto saxophone in the 4th grade. They didn't have guitar until you got to middle school, right? But I played the bass because even though I was a little kid, I had huge hands. I was kind of like a German Shepherd puppy, right? Big paws, right? And so they needed somebody to play the bass. And I used to play standing on a milk crate.
So you play double bass. Yeah, right.
And the orchestra teacher, the elementary school orchestra teacher, a guy named Ray Williams, great man. He took a liking to me right away. He used to pull me out of class to come to his music room and jam with him. He'd show me a little bass line.
Cool.
And he lit the fire, So that's and I had a feel, I would have been a much better bass player than I am a guitar player. It's just,
no, you're pretty good.
I appreciate it, but the bass was just something. I mean, I haven't played in years. When I pick it up, I still feel at home on it, and so it was just something about it that was probably my calling.
Yeah.
But I just love playing the guitar, and so that's I never looked back.
And academically, obviously, you were really smart. If you had an opportunity to get into Georgetown, that's like a very serious.
I did okay. I being smart is relative. I had a really good memory. So okay. Music and math are related. And so I caught on those kinds of things, abstract concepts pretty well. But I could read through things pretty quickly and memorize things. So that was, right. that got me through school without, give me a lot of extra time to work on playing music.
Yeah, but you got to have the discipline to get the work done, to get the,
Sure. But you can sit me in a room with something and I would sit there for hours doing it for sure. That's
cool.
I'm looking at those beautiful guitars on the wall behind you.
Right.
I mean, anybody that loves instruments, loves playing music. If you can't sit, it's funny. George Benson used to tell you. Someone asked him about me, and I remember this hilarious quote. He said, "If Mark was driving down the turnpike and got a flat tire, he'd pull over and start practicing and wait for someone to come along and change the tire."
That's great. That's
so
awesome.
That's kind of, you just, at any point in time, you can catch me with the guitar in my hands, trying to make some progress, trying to connect to the instrument, and trying to find my own pathways through sound.
But that's not surprising, because when you listen to you play, there are very few people that can play as fast and as articulate in jazz as you can.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, man. That's like, you see that in about 2 songs that, you listen to any 2 tracks. It's like, okay, let me pay attention. What did your dad do, if you don't mind me asking?
My dad, when he came back, my dad was drafted in World War II. When he came back, he became a policeman. He worked at NYPD till he retired. And then the year I was born, or shortly thereafter, that was when he retired from the NYPD. He went to work for the post office, and so he was a mailman on Long Island. And my mom,
yeah. What a smart dude! Double pensions, awesome. Yeah. No, I mean, that's like,
right
good for him, man. Yeah, right. Back in the day when those were like meaningful, yeah, good for him. Right on, man. Were you drawn to jazz early on? Like, did you get that from all these shows you saw, or?
Yeah, I mean, it was two things. First of all, I mean, people, if you're over the age of 40, you remember what life was like before you held media in your hand, right? Everything. So we weren't bombarded as kids. We weren't bombarded by, nonstop images of
this,
right? Of nonstop images of pop superstardom.
Right.
So everything, all sorts of art had an equal chance, an equal opportunity of getting our attention. That's
really a good point, man. And that no one has made that. That's a very good point. Yeah, there was no, even the radio, you'd hear different, one channel, everything. I mean, like a rainbow.
Right, and anybody in New York knew about WRVR, and all the great progressive rock. It's funny. I was opening for Steely. I've been opening for Steely Dan this month on their tour, and I hear things from their early records, and I remember, man, I heard that stuff on the radio when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I was talking about rap music to someone, and when it was just rap music before hip hop was a thing, was a franchise, right?
Sure.
And we used to have to. There was a guy, a legendary New York DJ, Mr. Magic, and he had like a college radio show that only came on Thursdays and Saturdays at like 11:30.
Is that like WFUV Fordham?
I can't remember what it was, but but I wouldn't be surprised. And I had a radio in my room, and my friends and I we'd all make these plans to stay up past our bedtime and with a cassette, you record Mr. Magic's radio show. I mean, that's how I heard the Sugar Hill Gang, early rap music. Okay. So having to work, so you had to kind of search for these things, and and that gave me so during the day, in school, orchestra was still cool. Playing in the band was cool. Having an instrument was cool. And I felt connected to we watched things like I never missed an installment of Austin City Limits. I watched it every Saturday afternoon. It's a great show. I mean, I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan, I saw George Benson, and then, the Boston Pops had a weekly series on PBS.
Right,
and I saw George Benson play Breezin' live with the Boston Pops Orchestra. I was maybe, 10, 11 years old. And so, playing music in school ensembles made me feel like I was, one of those, and these weren't these overblown visual phenomenon. These were just people playing great music, seeing It's That Cronin play violin, there was no escaping the obvious virtuosity of these musicians, and that was even as a kid, it was spellbinding. I remember sitting there watching people with like, wow, how do you do that? I got the guitar, and I'm trying to play a Twinkle Twinkle. You know what I mean? Like it just, but you could really appreciate what it was to be great. And I remember we even had, it was a public library series in Lindenhurst when I was a kid, where they would hire, and musicians would come out from the city. People who I later found out were world-renowned jazz musicians, and they had degrees from universities, and they taught different places, and they would mention that when they played. But there was a certain air of accomplishment around all of the musicians that I got to see and admire as a youngster. So to me, I didn't see a difference between becoming a musician or becoming a lawyer or a doctor. All these things were lofty pursuits, because it gave me an opportunity to pursue something better, greater than myself. That was not just a production, more actually a skill that I was going to have to master. So I went at it like that, and I think that's what drew me into it.
And so you just felt this inherent connection in seeing this, that's, like that would be your path, that you enjoyed this sense of accomplishment that you can do with that.
Absolutely. And I'm lucky that I had a feel for it. I mean, listen, I spent some time around some really natural musicians, guys with perfect pitch and great and perfect time and all these things. And I didn't have any of that.
Right.
But I always had a way of making music feel good.
Yeah.
And so putting a good feeling into the music. The way that I approach life is kind of how I play music. I'm happy and I'm smiling and I'm playing, and I let it kind of flow through me. And that was something that I wasn't aware of as a youngster, but it's entertaining. People enjoy it. So even other musicians. And so I made up for what the natural gifts that I didn't have that some of the other guys had. I made up for that with my enthusiasm and my hard work.
Right. You also seem like you were pretty, as you describe yourself, pretty together, like pretty, you had a pretty good level of awareness, it seems like. Maybe,
I think I grew into it. I hate to minimize everything. A lot of it's just dumb luck, like you find something you like and you work really hard at it. And, and you find, and I found myself in good situations. And I took some chances. Like I went to Berklee, and after my first 2 years there, I decided to go. I was playing around town. First of all, Berklee cost like $7,000 a year in 1983 to go to school. Right? Yeah. I mean, now it's $70,000 a year, right?
Yeah,
so.
Right.
I certainly there wasn't that much pressure to have like an after school job or do these things, but I wanted to buy some new gear and whatever. And I didn't call my dad like, hey, dad, So, because then you had to justify everything you wanted to buy, right? So I couldn't tell my dad I wanted to buy a champagne pink Telecaster, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I just feel like, no.
You're like, no, son, that's not happening. So, anyway, I was playing with a band, and these guys got a shot to go to Vegas. And I went out there, and I played with them for a week, and they were really good. So they got they were immediately awarded a long-standing contract with some promoter who had them playing. We played at all the casinos. So I stayed for about 5 months as an 18-year-old, which I can tell you was insane. Las Vegas in 1985 was
as an 18-year-old. Oh my! As an 18-year-old guitar player.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like,
so, I'm surprised I survived. But the point of the story is that after being there about 5 months or so, I seen a lot of the guys and a lot of the popular bands on the Strip and all that, and I realized that life in the lounges, or even if you got to, if you graduated to playing in the pit bands and so forth, was a dead end. Like it was just, these guys, you see guys in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, wearing their tuxedos, sitting at the, playing cards all night. And I was like, yeah, I don't think this is the end of the road for me. So I went back to Berklee, but a lot of the guys I played with stayed, and that's kind of where their careers ended, or that had played a big part in what happened next. And so I went back to school and got my degree. And not even for the sake of getting my degree, I didn't, just because I hadn't finished learning what I could learn. It was a whole lot more about playing the guitar that I hadn't gotten together. And getting back to school was really what when I got back, it opened a whole new door. I got back and got a little better and worked on some other things, and I had sort of scratched that curiosity about playing in more popular music situations. I realized that I enjoyed playing jazz more. And so
that's cool. This is what I'm talking about. That's a pretty high level of awareness to notice that. I think so. Yeah, I think it really is. 18 years old, and you have the wherewithal to say, I mean, when you're 18, I certainly couldn't think beyond this minute. But let alone to look and say, hey, I'm seeing these guys and this is not where I want to be. I think that's pretty smart. Yeah.
Well, I mean, like I said, I'm fortunate that I saw enough things that turned me off to be like, yeah, this looks like fun, but this place isn't going anywhere. I can always come back. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
I totally get
it. But I set out to try to become a great musician, and I wasn't great yet.
But the fact that you went and, like as you said, scratched that itch.
Yeah.
Been there, done that next.
Yeah, and I realized that there was a career out there for there's plenty of opportunities for guys who were for people who were more skilled and had more together.
Yeah.
Know much about arranging at that point yet. I was still just still learning a lot more about theory and getting into the constructs of music. And there was something a little more grassroots sound wise. That's when the digital era was just coming in, right? And so like, people were trading in their stomp boxes for rack mounted units and everything, and I had all that flashing lights and a rack behind me and all these things. But there was something about, it's funny. One of the stories I always tell is I spent 1 year of high school in Seattle, right? When my parents retired there.
What was that like going from like cultural changes?
It was like coming to a full stop at 100 miles an hour.
Was there a lot of black families in Seattle even?
There were not a lot of black people in Bellevue. It was pretty outside of Seattle. It was
white.
Bellevue was about as white as it got.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Yeah, and your dad being obviously super street smart, being a cop for all this. Why did they pick Bellevue?
Well, my sister and her husband, they bought a radio station. They bought a station called K-Fox.
That's wild. Yeah.
And so they moved there. My parents wanted to retire. They liked it. So they were like, well, you've only got a few years of high school. We're going too. So we moved out there. Right. And my parents loved it. It was great for them. They had always lived in New York. My mom had spent some time as a kid. She was born on a farm in Virginia. And so I think for them, it was really smart. They had built a nice home on Long Island. They sold for, and they bought up a great place in Seattle. It was a great investment for them. And so life was wonderful. They found it. They were friends with, remember the basketball coach, Lenny Wilkins, his parents.
Of course. Yeah.
Those were my parents' best friends. And so
that's cool.
They had a great social scene. And for me, Bellevue was kind of like, I was like from Mars. These kids in there, because you have to remember what life, people now don't really understand how regional things were back then.
Yeah.
I remember seeing my first MTV video. I remember these kids for my 16th birthday, that 1 year of high school, these girls took me to a concert. It was these 4 new bands, Devo, Oingo Boingo, and Men at Work, right? I got to see some, and so I had never seen or never heard that music before, and didn't, I was like, it was a really eye-opening experience. But growing up in Lindenhurst, Long Island, I was used to, I grew up around, it was a white neighborhood,
right.
So,
but you had access to the vibe.
Well, for sure, but at least I was not uncomfortable in that environment. It just it was just isolating because that's all it was.
Yeah.
But on that, while I was there, the high school, I still played bass in the orchestra as I played guitar in the band, and we took a trip with the high school orchestra to Disneyland in Anaheim.
Oh, that's cool.
And so, high school band, orchestra competition, we were playing, and I got tired of orchestra kids, so I was wandering around by myself. And I walked through the area where the giant teacups that spin around, teacup land, right? I walked through that, right? And I thought I heard, it sounded like a cool jazz guitar record playing. Just like somebody playing guitar. It's kind of an odd thing in the afternoon, at Disneyland. And I wandered into this club setting, and Joe Pass was sitting on stage playing solo guitar. It turns out they had a series, a jazz series for years at Disneyland, where they would just have these legendary musicians up, playing, and he's playing solo guitar. And so I had just bought my first. I bought a copy of Virtuoso #1.
Okay.
So I had a Joe Pass solo guitar record that I had no idea what to do with. I was listening to it, and because my bass teacher on Long Island had turned me on to Ray Brown, and so I had, a few of those Pablo recordings that featured Oscar Peterson, of course, and Joe Pass or Herb Ellis, and so I'm sitting there, and I just for 45 minutes I just watched this guy. I watched Joe Pass be Joe Pass, sit in a chair, with his 175 and a polytone, and I think that was probably the moment that registered the most with me, how important it was to be able to make magic with an instrument in the simplest of ways. He didn't have any effects, there was no flashing lights or smoke machines, or it was just a man and his guitar and a room full of people who were as mesmerized as I was. And so that I never lost my vision of that or my desire to be able to do that. And I think that's what sent me back to school. Like, I was like, I'm not there. I'm not even close to that yet. And the fact that all these people at these shows and play with this band, they were all like, "Oh, you guys are amazing and you're great." And I was like, "Yeah, okay, I see where this is going." I want to be great one day, but I'm not even close. And so I went back to school, and it just so happened that's about the time when Wynton Marsalis was coming into prominence.
Okay.
It's just a matter, and so that's only important because my going back to school, I sort of felt like, well, I'm going to go into playing jazz, and I saw one of the greatest musicians of all time sitting at a small place in Disneyland at 3:00 in the afternoon on a Thursday playing guitar. So that sort of doused the fire on my huge career aspirations. Like, I'm not going to be a big celebrity, but I'll be able to do that. And so I sort of resigned myself to this career of thinking I was not going to have much of a huge career, in terms of the recording industry or being a recording artist, but that I would hopefully be a great musician. And then all of a sudden, Wynton Marsalis exploded on the scene and changed my perception of all that.
To change it to more.
Well, I mean, all of a sudden, here's a young guy, not much older than me, winning Grammys, playing, doing concerts with the orchestras and playing with his band, and making a splash, commercially playing jazz music. And talking about it, and still, media then wasn't what it is wasn't what it was nowhere close to what it is now. So, there was a sense that I might actually be able to to pay my rent. Playing guitar, so then that was just the added incentive I needed. If there were times when I doubted that I might have a future, I might be able to support myself playing music, especially playing the music that I clearly was falling in love with, playing jazz.
Right.
Seeing him and seeing the success that he had, I didn't think that I was going to have that kind of success. But it really, it gave me the idea that I could have some success and and make a career for myself, and make a life for myself playing jazz guitar if I worked really hard, if I was good, and if I was in the right circles. And so that gave me something to shoot for.
You mentioned work ethic or working hard several times already. Where did that come from?
My parents, my family, my neighborhood. We grew up, it's amazing. I'm only 55, and I say that because I feel like, I grew up around so many way older people. In my short lifetime, I've seen so much of social consciousness, sort of change or evolve or devolve, however you want to look at it. But there was never, everyone I knew worked hard at something. There were a couple of guys from my neighborhood on Long Island that went to the NFL. They weren't stars; their names would be recognizable, but it was just a notion that that you didn't work hard to become famous or to become a superstar or to be rich. You worked hard because you took pride. That's how you earn the pride that you, who you are and what you do. Because people now have so much pride in everything it's all, and I don't mean to disparage it. Like, I'm not taking that get off my lawn mentality. It's just the idea that people have so much puffed up pride in things that they don't seem to be willing to work that hard on. And so that I grew up around people who were just the opposite. Like, you didn't work hard to be noticed. You worked hard to take pride in yourself. So you had something to be proud of.
Yeah. Personal pride of ownership of what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, and you being a musician, you know this. You can be as egotistical and full of yourself and high on yourself as you want, but man, there's something about the bandstand that's a great equalizer. You know what I mean? You step on
well spoken, man. Very well put. Yeah, right.
No matter how great you think you are, or how great people tell you are, you stand next to someone who's really amazing. Even if you're the only person who realizes you can't keep up, you can't keep up.
Yeah.
And that hits you hard. And I personally, I had that happen to me. I'm so grateful I had that happen to me so many times as a youngster going to school, because I would go to the jam sessions and play around clubs in Boston, and these guys who were a little older, a little more experienced, man, they would kick my butt on a regular basis. But that felt like a natural thing. It felt like apprenticeship was still part of the music.
Right.
We know you're not ready, so we're showing you how to get ready. This is what you're going to need. You're going to need to be able to play this and do this and handle these situations and play like this. And early on in my career, even after I started traveling and recording, it almost was as though those that opened the door to the next level of difficult learning experiences that I definitely had to come through.
Yeah. But I think it's so important. I mean, to me, work ethic goes so much. I define usually people by work ethic, because you're usually getting a good person if you see them. They're genuinely a hard worker and they're working for themselves, the personal pride of ownership.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a good defining block, I think. Okay, so you get out of Berklee.
Mm-hmm.
What happened then? What was your first break?
So I had been coming, while I was going to Berklee, my brother Roger, who had gone to Georgetown, he lived in D.C. and worked for a law firm there, for Williams and Connolly. I remember, and I used to take trips to go visit him. And I remember the name of the firm because they were the firm that handled the case when Ronald Reagan got shot.
Wow!
And my brother was an investigator, but somehow involved in that. I was a kid; I don't quite remember.
That's cool.
He was involved in all that, so I remember the name of Williams and Connolly. But anyway, there was a great club called the One Step Down in Washington D.C. and a local piano legend who was out of the Thelonious Monk school, led the sessions there. Lawrence Wheatley, and he had sessions there Friday, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. And I'd gone there, and his drummer was a guy named Wynard Harper, and Wynard's younger brother Philip and I were the same age, and we sat and played together. We were 15 or something, played together then. In fact, this might have been before maybe it was during my first semester at Berklee, and then maybe I was 16, okay. And then so it turns out that Philip Wynard had gone on to play with Betty Carter, and he was playing. And he used to run the late night after hours jam session at the Blue Note in New York, Tuesdays through Sundays from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. And so now,
how cool is that? Hanging out in clubs at 1 to 4.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you know what I mean.
That was awesome.
Years ago, I was in heaven, right? And so, and it was the Blue Note. So you'd see Freddie Hubbard or Elvin Jones or McCoy Tyner, whoever playing there that week, and then Joe Anderson, people like that. And then I could go into the club for free because I played for I played my 3-hour gig every night for $15. So my reward was I could go in. So I had a job working for Bear Stearns. I worked for a stockbroker.
What were you doing there?
I was a prospector, cold caller for Arthur Shininsky. I used to call and get people
hilarious
and pitch them and make an opening pitch and then get him on the phone and he would close the deal.
And this is, oh my God. How old were you then? So this is
21.
So this is after Berklee.
It's after Berklee. So I moved to Brooklyn. My brother owned a brownstone there, so I rented an apartment for my brother.
Okay.
And my sister, who was a stockbroker, had been a broker for years, used her connection to get a job at Bear Stearns because there were certainly better paying jobs I mean, I wasn't a stockbroker. I was working for a broker. So,
but she was probably thinking, okay, if the music thing doesn't work, you're in a good slot to make
family was thinking that,
make serious money. Okay,
sure.
that's really cool, man. That's very
great,
cool.
great, and it all, I was working there from 8:30 to 4:30, right, at 55 Water Street, and then I would go home and practice, hang out with my girlfriend, and then get to the Blue Note by midnight, hear the end of the last set, and play from 1 to 4, right, and then get up,
and then go back and work the next day.
And they go home and they go to be working. But at 20 years old, dude,
you can do that. Yeah.
Who needs sleep at 20 years old?
You're right.
So, right. Yeah. So
now maybe not so much.
Yeah, oh God, are you kidding me? Yeah, I can work for 2 days and I have to sleep for 3 days. The Blue Note had at that year. This was 1987. I believe it was the 6th anniversary of that location of the club. And just to give you an idea of what the music scene was like, the celebrity host they had for their anniversary week was Billy Eckstine.
Wow.
Billy Eckstine was playing with his band, and his son Guy, one of his sons, was playing drums, and we connected later. But his guests for the week were Tony Bennett, Sarah Vaughan, and George Benson.
Wow.
So I'm there, and so I'm there, and so instead of playing from 1 to 4 for this week, they had for this particular night for the anniversary party, they had the late night band come on and play during the intermissions. So there was, constant music, continuous music. And George Benson came in with his wife, and the club owner said, "Hey man, George is here, but he doesn't have his guitar. Can he use yours?"
Like, twist my arm.
I was like, yeah. So I walk over and I introduced me to him.
What did you have? What were you playing then?
I had an Ibanez Lawsuit model.
Okay.
In fact, there's a picture of George playing that guitar that night on the wall when you walk into the Blue Note. It's right by the door.
That's great, man.
I still have that guitar. Anyway, I had gone. George, one of George's sons, Robert, had gone to Berklee. His first semester was my last, and so I knew him. So I mentioned that I knew Robert, and talked to George. We talked for a second, and George looked at my guitar, and he looked at me, and those Lawsuit models, there's only a few of them, right? And George looked at it, and he said, "Brother, every time I see one of these guitars, I buy it." And I was like, "Man, you can't." And I was like, "You can't have my guitar." And I was thinking to myself, "Wait a minute, how much?" Anyway, he went on stage. Cool, he played, and of course, it was amazing. He played Billy's Bounce and What's New, and I don't know why he played those songs, but those were, at the time, I was all particular record, Blue Benson, with Herbie Hancock and I was listening to that all the time. And he played my 2 favorite songs from the recording, Billy's Bounce and What's New. Billy Cobham, Ron Carter, and Herbie Hancock, right? So anyway, when he came,
was Ron at that show?
No.
Okay, you're just talking about on the record.
Yeah, on the record, yeah. And so it was this Billy Eckstine's band, and so his trio was playing, and George played. And so when he came off the stage and handed me the guitar back, I remember George's wife said, "Well, I guess you're not going to play tonight." And I was like, "Oh God, no!" and then they announced the band was taking a break, which meant I had to go up and play right then. And I'm sure George could see the panic on my set in, and he said to me, "Well, I'd love to hear you play, but my wife and I have another engagement, so we're going to get out of here. I'll come back and see you some other time." And while you think I would be disappointed that I didn't get to play for George, I was actually super relieved, right?
I'm sure.
I'm inspired. I just saw my hero play right in front of me. And now I'm relaxed because he's not going to be there. And went on stage and I played the best I had played up to that point. Little did I know George was standing behind the door where I couldn't see him, but he could hear me.
On purpose?
He waited to hear me play.
That's a pretty class. That's a class act, man. That was so cool. Yeah, that's a real class act, man, to do that. Yeah. That he wanted to give you the respect to listen to you, but he wanted to give you the respect not to make you feel anything but how man, that's a class act. Yeah,
that was a big deal. And so he left a note that I saw afterwards that he would be back to see me play the following week. And he came back. He did. He came back a week later.
The 1 to 4 slot?
Yeah, he came back because Bob James was playing
Okay.
the following week with his band, so he came and played us, Saturday with Bob James, and then when they got done, they got a bottle of champagne. This is at a table watching me and the late night guys play. And so he pulled me to the side on my break about 2 a.m. George was a late night guy. He was always hanging out late back in those days, and he said, "Listen, man, playing with these young guys is great, but it's time for you to step up and play with some of the masters of the music who were still living at the time, so you can have someone put pressure on you to be at your best, so you can have someone to learn from, and someone who will put pressure on you to be your best all the time, because you play with your contemporaries, that can be extremely forgiving and misleading, right?" And so his suggestion was that I needed to play with Jack McDuff.
Wow. Wait a minute. So how? Go ahead. Finish your story. I apologize. I'm all these.
Okay. Yeah.
He's telling you this, right? This is like, what's going through your mind, right? Because that's not what you were expecting.
No. I was like, oh. I thought I was in the place to be, right? So right. I'm like, man, because the late night session at the Blue Note was where everyone went when they got, all the young guys, Terrence Blanchard and Donald Harrison and Ralph Peterson and Rodney Jones and Bob, everybody, anybody under the age of 40, when they played in town in New York, the Blue Note was where they went, for the late night session to hang up. Branford Marsalis would come in and play. Wynton would come play, all the cats would come through, and occasionally, I remember playing. That's where I met Jack DeJohnette, and that's where I met John Schofield, and that's where I met Mike. I met all these guys there, and so Krall, and I had met Jack McDuff, but he kind of gave me the cold shoulder, and I was a kid. I just said hi, and he was like,
but so George tells you to play with Jack, and you're like, oh. Great, Mr. Personality. Yeah. Thanks.
Right. But then he said he was getting ready to go on the road, go to Europe or whatever. But that when he got back, he would take me to Jack's home club uptown in Harlem, and introduce me. And so I figured, oh well, with George's with George's anointing, I'll be fine, right?
Right.
So I woke up the next day going, George said he'd be back in a month. I'm going to find Jack today. So I called around and found out where Jack played, and I went to that place that night. He was playing at a place called Showman's. It was on Frederick Douglass between 124th and 125th.
Okay.
And I was a suburban kid who was just getting used to living in Brooklyn, but I don't think I'd ever been to Harlem.
Dude, back in the day, that was like a tough spot, to be honest with you.
Yeah. And so I got on the subway, took the A train to 125th Street, and I was probably wearing a suit. Because everybody wore suits back then, all the musicians wore it. So I was going to walk up to Jack.
You're not showing up at Jack McDuff's in jeans, man.
Yeah, exactly. Not
represent.
1988, right? So or 87. So I got up there, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh," I think he recognized me. He just said, "Well," he says, "You're in luck. My guitar player's quitting. So come by my apartment tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. or whatever it is, and you can audition." So
wait a minute, man. That was really ballsy of you in a sense, man. But how cool?
Are you kidding me? Yeah, it was. I look back at that. I can't believe I had the courage that I was like,
yeah, that was a lot of courage it took. Not really balls, but just there was nothing wrong with it. But it was just like
no, it was ballsy for sure. I went up and I introduced myself. I'm a guitar player, and I met George Benson last night. And he said that that I should come up and audition for your band. And so I knew that mentioning George's name, that guys like that, Jack knew that, well, there's no point in me like mentioning George's name if I can't back it up.
Of course, yeah, right. You're not going to just randomly walk in and say,
all I'm going to do is volunteer myself for an ass whooping. Like, what I mean? Right. He's just going to yell at me, right? So,
he's did you say that a couple, and by the way, George, when George was talking.
George said it, right? So I show up at his place, with my guitar at 10 a.m. and
up in Frederick Douglass up there.
Yeah, show up at his apartment. He lived over at Lenox Terrace. This was 133rd and 5th Avenue, right?
Okay.
At Lenox, right? So I show up there the next morning, and so we played. He pulled out a stack. Jack was a great writer. He had great charts, and he was inspired a lot by Thad Jones. So he had these really cool arrangements for 4 horns and then 1 horn and for saxophone and guitar. And it was my first time playing, as guitar players, thank God I could read, because as guitar players, they throw chord slashes at us and, whatever. And so Jack had all these notes I had to read and play and, play these things in unison and harmony with the saxophone player. And I was prepared for that. So that's
so awesome, man.
I was better at that than I was at soloing. So thank God I was ready to read those parts.
That's probably why George picked Jack in hindsight, because he knew your background. He knew what your training was. He knew by listening to you what you needed, where the improvements were going to be made. Absolutely. Wow, that's pretty perceptive, man, of him.
Yeah. And very kind of him to, to take a moment to steer me in that direction. So, but then that's where this is where the other side of life steps in, right? So, all right, so I show. So Jack says, "Okay, you're hired." Basically, I had to impose upon his saxophone player Andrew Beals at the time to teach me some of the things that weren't in the music. But I went over to Andrew's place. He showed me the music, and I got the gig. So the next night I'm on the bandstand with him playing. And after the first set, Jack looks somebody goes, it looks like a guitar, but it sounds like a banjo. You're fired.
Oh my God. Like right after the set?
Like, you're fired, you're done. And first of all, I was a little offended by the fact that he said my guitar sounded like a banjo.
Oh my God.
And he kept saying, "Stop playing those banjo chords." And and I'm thinking to myself, what the heck is a banjo chord? But I knew it was meant to be offensive.
It wasn't complimentary, whatever a banjo chord is.
Whatever it was, and I realized that he hated the banjo. But what he was trying to say was that when I was comping, not playing the lines or not soloing, and I was comping, he wanted me to comp with him. And sometimes the voicings I played clashed with his. He had certain habits. A 2-5-1 to a major chord, you play D minor 7 to G7 to C major 7. And if you're going to alter if you alter the dominant chord, you played a natural 13 and a flat 9. That was his tendency. And if it was going to a minor chord, you played minor 7 flat 5 to a flat 13 with a sharp 9 and flat 9. And so and those little subtleties, if I mixed them up or played, and the organ was distorted and loud, I don't know. I just I was doing the best I could and trying to make sense of everything that was happening.
Well, you didn't know anything. You don't know his little. You're just like you're coming from school.
Right. And so he said, "You're fired." And he said, "But now tomorrow night, what I need you to do is play the right chords." And I was like, "Oh, I'm not fired. I'm on probation."
Yeah. Double secret probation.
Right. Double secret. Exactly.
Holy crap.
So, all right. So for the next couple of weeks, we played Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Trust me.
Did he tell you? I'm assuming he told you right afterwards as well. Hey, this is really or did someone hip you to that?
Not a thing. He just, tomorrow night, start at 10:30. So I positioned myself the next night right next to him so I could see his hands, and I keyed in more closely. And so I listened and learned. I picked up his tendencies and I watched the voices that he played, and I would learn them and say, "Okay, now I know what to play."
Wow, is that you had to wow?
Yeah, it was
man,
fire. But I was not gonna trust me. I was not gonna fail and lose this gig.
But that's not easy to sit there and watch what he's playing.
It was nerve-wracking.
And then to translate it. I don't care how good of unless you're as good a piano player as you are a guitarist.
Right, which I wasn't. Yeah.
Very difficult. And then wow, good for man. That's really impressive.
But he saw, I realized with Jack as much, he had trained George in the same way, Jack. all he wanted to see is how I was going to respond to what he said. It was all about that
work ethic.
Work ethic, exactly.
Yeah,
and when he saw me,
wow.
He's like, you know what to do. You're paying attention. Then he'd make it easier. He'd hold the cord out a little longer. Just once he saw that I was going about it the right way, then he gave me, and I would ask him questions, and we became very close. But within a few weeks, George is such a showboat, in all the best ways. So George was coming in from Europe, and he called the club. He called up the showmans from the airplane. This is still the '80s. That's a big deal, right? He called from the phone, in the
airplane,
in the airplane, right? And how I know this is because Jack said the phone rang. On the break, he was on the phone at the club, and he comes. He says, "Yeah, George Benson's coming tonight. He just called me from the airplane." And Jack was showing off, and I was like, "Oh God, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready for George."
George didn't know in the meanwhile that because he was in Europe,
right? George, true to his word, was going to come up and tell Jack about me, and then call me up, whatever, and we're going to go up there together. So George shows up, walks in the club, and I'm on stage playing.
You had to feel good.
Oh, I felt great. Yeah.
Honestly, man, that's a great accomplishment for you, man. That's really cool that you did that. That's just like a career defining and self-esteem building move.
For sure.
Yeah, man. Congrats. That was good for you, man.
Wow. And thank you. But when I say dumb luck, all I mean is that I had no idea anything like that it was going to work out, that these steps would fall into place. You just work hard, you try something, you make the best move you can and see what happens, and George, and then I was playing, I had that guitar, the Lawsuit model, and a Roland Cube 100. Remember the little orange amps? And so I had that, which my version of a polytone, and I hated my sound, I'm struggling with my tone, just try to get a really rich, warm sound that didn't sound like it was flat on cardboard. How sometimes it just sounds like flat and no life, and
sure.
And but you only got treble, mid, and bass, and reverb. Like it's just, the guitar just had volume.
What are you going to turn up, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm looking for the knob that said better. Where's
the better knob? That's great, man. I've never heard that. Where's the better knob?
So George comes in and he looks. He's like, "Brother, you're already here, man. This is great." And so he was all excited, and he came to sit in.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a T-shirt and put it in the merch store with a guitar with a better knob.
Yeah, man.
And when it comes out, I'm going to send it to you.
Yeah, man. Please do. That'll be awesome.
I definitely will. That's a great one, man. All right, go ahead. Shut up. I'll shut up.
All right. So he George came to sit in, and I handed him my guitar. And I turned my back to walk off the stage as he's walking on, and I saw him fiddling with the amp a little bit. And I sat down, and he played a couple of songs, and it was George. It was brilliant. And the sound was perfect. It sounded just like Breezing and all,
With your same setup.
He fixed it. Yeah, with my setup. Like he fixed it. He found the better knob, you know what I mean?
Knob, yeah.
And so then I went back on stage, and he handed me the guitar, and I looked at the amp, and he hadn't touched the thing. It was all in his hand.
Wow.
He hadn't touched the knob, and I was like, oh. So now
great lesson, though. Great lesson.
I mean, right now, but at that point, it's a great mystery, right? I'm just like, okay. Now what? And so when the set was over, George said, "Well, this is my phone number." He says, "Man, I'm so happy to see you here. Now he said, we're going to get all that other stuff straight. So call me and come out to my house tomorrow morning." He said, "So meet me." I had to meet him at the George Washington Bridge. It gets where the A train, because he lives in Jersey. So the A train would take you to the 178 and George Washington. I met him there, I don't know, 9 a.m., 10 a.m., something like that. And so he picked me up in his Rolls Royce. And we drove.
So he was like pimping even back then.
Oh yeah, George. Oh, this was 1988. George was platinum records and all that, right? And so, all right. So we were in the Rolls Royce. We were driving around, running some errands in New York, and then we went to his place in Englewood, straight down into the basement. We had a recording studio, a full-blown recording studio, and a vault, like a bank vault, practically, with all the guitars in it.
Wow.
And man, we spent by my first day there, I must have been there for 7-8 hours. playing all like the Intellects and he had gold top Les Pauls and all kind of Johnny Smiths and all these great guitarists. And that's how it started. We play together, and I spent a lot of time just kind of sitting there watching him play and asking questions. And George is one of those rare musicians who is only a musician because because his ear is a theory teacher. Some people, you got to learn the math, you learn the theory, you try it, you go back and you train your ear to keep up, and you go back and forth. People like George, he hears something and his ear automatically breaks it down. So he knows what the notes are and he understands the relationship, and then he works so hard practicing. There's nothing with the guitar he couldn't play. So George could play all these advanced musical he had learned tons of recordings by Johnny Smith and Tal Farlow, and George had influences that were not necessarily the things you would imagine, because it wasn't you didn't hear him playing it that way in that setting. And you wouldn't hear George with Lonnie Smith and go, "Oh, he got that from Tal Farlow or Joe Pass," but that's where he got it from,
Okay.
And he had so much Charlie Christian in his playing and on all these things, and so George wouldn't say, "Oh, well, it's a Lydian scale or so this scale." He would just, "Brother, you play it," and sometimes he'd play it a little faster and make me try to catch on, and we would do that for hours, and every couple of weeks when he was in town, I'd go back to his place, and finally he started recording. He wanted to start recording me. So he asked me to bring some of my friends over. They recorded in his studio. We made little demo tapes, and he started spreading the word around. And at the same, and I was playing with McDuff, and I met a guy named Charlie Feldman who worked for BMI, and he introduced me to a guy named Paul Tannen, who became my first manager. And they paid for a demo tape for me to make a professional demo tape, recording, and they sent it to Tommy LaPuma because they had connections with Mo Austin and Warner Brothers. And George had already mentioned my name to Tommy, and that's how I got my first record deal.
Wow. So he really shepherded your career.
For sure.
How much older than you was he back? How much older than he's still the same age? How much older is he?
So George was 25. We were 25 years apart.
So it was almost like a father-son.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm the same. His son Robert and I are the exact same age.
Wow, that's amazing, man. What a sweetheart.
For sure. Yeah, and I can say, I saw him recently. I was out. He lives in Arizona, and I saw him. I was there out in April for International Jazz Day. George is still one of the most warm-hearted, most generous, kind-hearted people I've ever known. And to be that way and remain that way through years and years of superstardom is amazing and incredible in and of itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I couldn't find a negative thing to say about George if I tried. And he's always been super sweet to me. He just took a liking to me, and I'm very, there were certainly other guitar players out there who were better or, whatever. It just, we had a connection, he allowed me to stay close to him. And
that enthusiasm, man.
I get, yeah,
come on, man. That's like, when someone's got a smile on their face, man, it's almost like a magnet, and people don't realize that because everybody's got shit going on in their lives.
Sure, for sure.
You live 55, 60 years. You've been through it, something or some things, but man, it doesn't cost you extra to put a smile on your face.
For sure. That's true.
No matter what age you are, even when you're 20, when you're struggling to make a buck, you got under pressure, you're putting yourself under pressure, girls, whatever. Yeah. He probably saw that in you, man. That spark, it's like when you meet a woman, why do you connect with some partners and then others, looks are out, there's that thing, man, that
gotta be a thing for sure.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. I'm so happy that happened to you.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
And so he shepherded your career and got you started. And how long did he work with you for? Or like after that, did you still play with him or? Sure.
In fact, so that, at that point, it went to the next level. George, I wasn't sure So he, even after I made my first record, I would have been more than happy to play rhythm guitar in his band. You know what I mean? I did, and even though I probably wouldn't have been very good at it, and I'm sure George had already been through many times having someone play in the band who really wanted to play with him and be like, which was not your job if you were the rhythm guitar player in his band.
Yeah.
But so George always sort of helped to steer me in the right direction. He'd let me do things with him. We'd sit in with his band, but he always came if I was playing in the city, he would come and sit in and play with my band and do spots and just be around, be present. He was very generous with his celebrity status. He had he would share the spotlight with me in ways. For instance, I got a call in the summer of 1991 when I was out on the Jazz Futures tour. This is probably the next sort of defining moment of my early career. I was a member of Roy Hargrove's band, and the band was turned into this young group of all-stars called the Jazz Futures. And we spent the summer of 1991 touring around the States, opening for the Neville Brothers and Wynton Branford Marsalis, and then touring around Europe, opening for Miles Davis. And I mean, couldn't find anybody good, right? And so, and that was, that was Miles's last tour, and it was a huge deal. And so, I remember.
You're still a kid. You're 23.
I was 24, 23, 24. Yeah, as a kid.
Wow.
Yeah, and so we are. While on the Jazz Futures tour, the guy who was Roy's manager, Roy Hargrove's manager, Larry Clothier, who was also organizing the tour with George Wein, got me some trio gigs. So Chris McBride was playing bass and Krall was playing drums. So we played a trio gig in Milan, Italy. And then after that gig, I got there was a call for me to go to play in Switzerland at the Montreux Jazz Festival as a guest with Quincy Jones.
Oh, and this is all coming out of this.
Yeah, right. And so this is, and my first record was already out from Warner Brothers, and it had done really well. I'd gotten some attention, and so I get there, and I had no idea what, you gotta remember, this is still really pre-internet, but so I didn't know what I got a fax from my agent and a plane ticket,
Yeah, of course.
You go, right? So I get there, and it's so Quincy Jones was doing the music from the album Smackwater Jack, the album that he did with the Count Basie band, where he, arrangements and all that, live, right? And so the Count Basie band is there. Frank Foster's there directing the band, playing in the saxophone section. Quincy Jones is going to conduct. And his guest stars were George Duke, George Benson, Clark Terry, Chaka Khan, and Rochelle Farrell, and me.
Wow.
Right? I'm just like, well, what am I doing here?
Yeah. No, but you had the fact that George was there probably.
Well, I was like, it all started to unfold. And so George was the opening to the first part of the concert was George Benson's band, right? George went out, and I mean, he just tore the place apart. Right? It was a big, as usual. And the second half of the concert was this big, ginormous all-star production. So we're at rehearsal. And I'm just standing there kind of like this, got my guitar, and I'm just like, I'm just so thrilled to be in the room. Greg Fillingane's there. I'm just here. I don't have to play a note.
Yeah.
Quincy Jones, he's doing his thing, and so we get to the song Manteca, and George says, "Hey, Q." I was like, "Oh my God, that's cool." That's who I am. I'm like, "Oh my God, I just heard him say he just called him Q." He's like, "Q. Why don't you let Mark?" Because this is a feature for George, and he says, "Why don't you let Mark solo on this with me?" And I'm thinking, no. Like, if anything, just find me a little spot on some song where just where I can kind of touch it.
Great song too that you're getting the song.
And so So Quincy says, okay, we'll open it up. He says, so George, you solo first, and then I'll point to Mark. And so I'm looking at George going, okay, and so there's a great video on YouTube of me playing, playing with the orchestra, and playing Manteca, with George solos, and then and I play, and I very purposely played a short solo, a very short thing, but it was really well received, and George gave me a lot of on-stage love, and I'll never forget when the concert was over, I was walking it back, kind of just in shock, walking down the hallway, and Chaka Khan called to me. She said, come here for a second, youngster. And I walked in, and she's sitting there, and she said, let me just tell you something. I've known George Benson since I was a little girl, and I have never seen anyone make him do this. She said, congratulations to you.
That is really cool. Man, it sounds like you, like everybody rallied around you through him.
For sure.
That's really cool.
And I will say this, looking back on it, I didn't know how to be any other way, but I was really humbled by all those experiences and opportunities, and grateful and happy to be there.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that was just written all over my face. And so I think that invited people to be more inviting than they would be had I been, pounding on my head, some, egotistical kid, you thinking I was, on top of the world. Yeah. I mean, it's just,
how would anybody do that with George? You get spanked. I mean,
for sure.
He did you a favor not having you play rhythm in his band, even though emotionally the love was there. Your ability to flourish as a player would not have been as great.
No, not at all.
Sublimated to him, supporting him. Nothing wrong with that, but he that's not what you wanted, and he knew that that's not what was right for you.
Right, absolutely. And so I was grateful for all the time I got, for any opportunity I had to be around him and play with him and all that, and also really grateful that he was mindful of my future. He's like, man, that was really sweet of him to care. You know what I mean? And
yes,
because he certainly could have just had me used whatever I had to his benefit, but he didn't need it.
Well, plus guys like that always have people, and a lot of guys like that in music and business. It's like, which guy is the flavor of the month? Right. Sure. I mean, that's just the way it is when you're George Benson or whoever, everybody's wanting a piece, and like, and a lot more often than not, it's like, that's your flavor of the month or 6 months, and it's really cool of him that he was genuinely looking out for you. That was very nice, man. Yeah. What a good series of stories. Thank you for sharing that, man. Absolutely. That's so cool. What was your biggest takeaways from all of that? As a musician and as a person? Well, as a musician, I realized that music was big. Music and having a career and a future, and the opportunities to play music were bigger than stylist. Everything was so focused on stylistic choices at that point. The lines separating the marketing of music were drawn in the sand. Jazz is on this side. What bin are you in? Yeah, and everyone was so concerned with that. And I was starting to realize that, the greatest musicians made music that transcended, the boundaries and all of these divisive terms and sort of lived above it. That's where George did. That's where Herbie Hancock. That's where Wayne Shorter. That's where Quincy Jones. That's where Mike Stern. That's where John Scott. That's where all the legends. They lived above that because they just played music, but they were smart about the way that they presented their artistry to the people. Here's something I'll tell you that I learned that I sort of laugh about when I think about myself and my contemporaries as we were coming up. We held the audience responsible for understanding what we play, and the notion amongst young jazz musicians it's almost like a rite of passage, is this thing where if it's not well received, you blame the crowd for it. Yeah,
You know?
it's because you're not high enough on the evolutionary
Yeah,
music
you guys
scale.
have to work hard enough to
You don't
understand.
understand. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
that's
no,
right.
and we would lean on these isolated, completely out of context quotes from people like, there's a quote in one of those Miles Davis biographies where this woman, a famous actress whose name I can't remember, ran up to him in the late 50s and was like, Miles, there's new music, I don't understand it, and he says that I'm paraphrasing in with his whisper voice. He says, well, I've been working on this for 15 years. How can you hope to understand it in 15 minutes?
Yeah,
It's all this cinematic.
you're not high enough up the food chain.
Yeah, like you go back and sit down and bask in your ignorance. You know that. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
And I realized that what undoubtedly kept the great musicians great and sort of set them apart was the ability to translate their brilliance into a language everyone could speak and understand. And that was so as a musician and as a person, that informed my future, because I realized that my goals were what was going to help me to achieve a future and the things that I wanted to do and people I wanted to play with and things I wanted was going to be my ability to translate my love for music and the guitar and all the things that I was working on, translate that into a language I could speak to a person on the street. Because without people who understanding what you play, then the only thing you have then is that question of, well, is it great because it's great? Is it great?
Well, then you're the smartest broke musician in town.
Right. And who wants to wear that? Who wants to wear that crown?
Not many. What a great lesson to take away from there, man. And you can put that in even non-musical terms of no matter how smart you are, man. If you can't communicate with the common man, if you can't translate and make people react, what good? Are you the smartest guy? Well,
exactly right. Right.
Really, okay, you are.
And what defines that exactly? And then the other thing is, I never felt superhuman as a musician, and I only say that because I was around. I've been around a lot of musicians who literally are. I mean, they're just some people, who can play every instrument, and they, and we know when someone's great at something in a way that we're not. Like, you know what I mean? So you see these, and so I'm the common man.
Yeah.
I always looked at myself as someone who just had some ability, and I worked really hard at it. I still work really hard at it, and so I found that there are a lot of people out in the world who love what I love about music, and that's more important than loving the music that I love. If we love the same things about music, we can relate, we can communicate, and that became my mantra, just to find ways to communicate what I love about music and make that more important than the music itself.
Man, thank you. That's really cool. I had Ron Carter on here, and I've had 850 guests on the show. That was the only one I was like, honestly petrified, because you could just tell he don't suffer fools easy.
No.
Number one. And number two, I'm not real familiar. That's probably my weakest link musically. And so the last thing I wanted to do was make him feel even the slightest bit that I didn't do my homework.
Sure.
So I wasn't going to talk about Miles. I just listened to tons of his own solo records, and we talked about some of them. And and everybody's asking him questions about Miles. I said, I'm not going to ask him questions about Miles. He's such a class act. He's not going to. Everybody asks him, did you see Miles? Was he rough with you? No, Mr. Davis was lovely with me. He got my career. Of course, he's not going to say that. Ask him the same, you want a different answer, ask him a different question, right? So I said, I'm not going to ask him about my, plus it's rude. I think, you come on my show, talk about you. That's kind of rude. Anyway.
Right.
Anyway.
It was very smart, by the way, and very nice of you.
Well, it's like, come on. It's, it's like someone's coming to my house for dinner and I'm going to say, hey man, tell me about your boss. Like,
Right. Tell me about your next door neighbor. Right.
Yeah, you know, like how rude. I wouldn't want someone to. It's like anyway. So that's just like common courtesy. So
absolutely. Would you be surprised how devoid that is? You know.
I don't. Whatever. But what you just said, that's what I got out of Ron. He's really super demanding. He's not going to ask you to give any more than he's given himself of himself, but all he wants to do is find that common ground and give it to you.
Right.
And that's exactly what you said. That's what I learned about him, man. And it was, yeah, man, you're a very smart guy. It's good to hear all these things. It's like really, I learned, you know, it just keeps the important stuff in my head, you know, and sure knows. Man, I got, all right. Now you got me all pumped up. I don't know where to start next. Joe Zawinul.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Just at European festivals, you get to play with different people.
Oh, okay. What was that like?
I mean, you know,
did you have heads up like what you're going to play? Because I don't know. Can you just step into it with that dude?
If he allows it, yeah, sure.
Wow.
Yeah. So you know, and so yeah, it was great. I just remember, first of all, you know, there's two Joe Zawinuls, right? You know, I mean, and I don't mean that. Obviously, he's just one. He's one amazing creator. But there's, you know, there's the acoustic piano Cannibal Adderley version, and then there's, you know, Weather Report and beyond. And so I just was marveling at, you know, and also it's important to mention that for musicians of my, you know, we didn't have YouTube and all these videos and things growing up.
That's what I'm saying. How do you just step on stage with that dude?
There's so much recorded history that I didn't know about, and you know, hadn't seen, and so to finally put a face to the music, to that sound, and see him play, and just so in awe of everything that he accomplished. It's like he had two careers, you know. It's like, you know, and so I spent most of the time just like. You know,
that's what I mean. It's like
it's very polarizing, you know, in a great way. It was inspiring, but just, but that, you know, and the other thing, you know, the word I don't often use, but it's always there, is integrity. Like, just the fact that these guys, that Joe Zawinul was someone who brought integrity to every, you know, to honesty, you know, artistic honesty and excellence to every musical offering. And that, and, you know, I just, in such, he cared so much about what he was doing. I remember, you know, playing at the festival, my first time playing at the festival in Istanbul. And he was, and there was a big controversy at the airport because he had several $1,000s in overweight charges for all the keyboards he had with him on the road, you know, and someone saying, well, why would you bother to do that? And I just remember thinking, because he cares that much about presenting the music that he's recorded to the audience, to these people who are going to pay all this money to come see him play. He wants to give them that experience. And at that time, there was no, this is the 90s. There's no laptop with all your sounds in it. He's got to have keyboards and enable cases, and you know, and so why would, you know, you can't get that with a DX7, you know what I mean? And so so, but the fact that he incurred that much personal expense and was going through all that, it wasn't because it wasn't Spinal Tap. It wasn't about his ego or what he wanted to do, because he really cared about the music. You know, it was really important, and there was no amount of personal expense or inconvenience that he wouldn't go through or suffer through to try to present the art in its purest form. And that really struck me, that, you know, it wasn't the audience's responsibility or their burden or their job to approximate how it was supposed to sound. It was my responsibility as an artist to present the music that I wanted them to like. And I, you know, I had a few missteps. I remember once I did a record for Warner Brothers that was half acoustic jazz and half sort of smooth jazz. And this was 1993 or so, and it was at the urging of the record company that I did it, and I was into it. Like, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like they made me do something I didn't want to do. I just thought it would be clever. Like, well, you know, I'm really into playing acoustic jazz. Smooth jazz will probably get me some more fans, and maybe I'll have some bigger gigs. So I'll do both.
Sure.
And I had given no thought to the idea that it was becoming two very separate audiences.
Right.
Right. And so there was no greater illustration of that than, the huge radio station in New York for years was CD 101.9. Right. That was the thing. You know, you see those commercials and they had Miles Davis and Kenny G and all that. And I had done a cover of Stevie Wonder's That Girl. And this song, they still play it. They play it everywhere. It's, this is almost 30 years now. They still play this song.
That's
it
awesome.
Was just, I did it with Chris Walker, the great bass player, who played with Al Jarreau for years. He produced it, and he had brought his guys in, and it was great. And I showed up at the jazz club in Montclair. I was on tour with my trio. The record was out, but I was just doing the acoustic stuff, right? And so far, I was okay. People would come up, people kind of knew who I was, whatever. But not when I got to Montclair and we pulled up in the parking lot, and I could just tell by the cars in the parking lot, this was not a jazz audience. I was like, there are too many fancy cars here.
Oh, man.
I was like, uh-oh. We got inside and there were all these people just dressed to the nine. It just had smooth jazz audience written all over. And so, then we got on stage and we kind of, and the place was packed, and you could kind of hear this buzz in the audience, and one guy just yelled out, "Hey, Mark, where's all your keyboards and your background singers?" And I was like, because it was just me, acoustic bass and drums. I just had trio. And I was like, oh. So I got on the microphone. I'll never forget this. Because I was not going to fail in front of these people. Right? I said, I realized that a lot of you are fans of my new recording and have come to hear that music, and I can't thank you enough. I'm so grateful for all the love and support. But we actually came prepared to play some different music. So what we're gonna do is, since you guys are here, and they're like, yeah, man, that's what we want to hear. I said, we're going to do our best to play that music for you and entertain you the best way we can, just like this. Even, we're not going to play what we came to play. We're going to play what you guys came to hear.
That was pretty cool of you to own that.
The guy was like, "Oh man, we're with you." The same guy. Just do. And we played some acoustic versions of that stuff, and it didn't have keyboards and singers and whatever, but we played, and people enjoyed it, and I learned that, to me, that was a harsh lesson. We entertained the people, and everybody enjoyed it. I think we even got a standing ovation. It was nice, but the point of it was, you have to be prepared to present the music you record and be honest and be true to your audience. These people, you go out to work hard to get. People deserve your honesty and your integrity. And so if you record some music, if you're going to make you can never do something just for, I could never feel good about doing something that I didn't really believe in or didn't love, because that could be what it is that you have to do the rest of your life. And I remember George Benson told me, he said, man, as a young guy, the worst thing that could happen to you is you have a hit record. And I said, well, what do you mean? He says, because, man, you're going to have to play that record the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And he said, and he was so grateful. Listen, I'm sure George would love to have had, because he was a smart businessman who worked really hard. It didn't make a lot of traction. He didn't have a lot of traction career-wise before Breezing. He did lots of different things. He was great, but George would tell stories about playing club was empty, and this is during the CTI days. Even he said, in fact, it was B.B. King who he was very close to. He said to him, BB used to come see him play all the time. And he said one night, he said, George, he said, there's nobody in here. He said, man, but you're playing beautifully. He said, what you got to do is put a beat behind the music. Man, people can't hear all that jazz. He said, you play the same way you're playing, put a beat behind it, and you'll fill the place up. And eventually that became Breezing. Because if you think about it, I mean, man, they are stretching out. That record is all kind of playing.
Yeah, totally.
But it's just, but there's a good beat behind it, and it's Bobby Womack's, riff on Breezing, and that kind of stuff was a bridge between all that great playing and the language that everybody can understand. But George was really grateful that he'd gotten all those years of having a career but not having hits, because it gave him room to experiment and try different things and find his sound. And it's funny, after Breezing, because Breezing was just, to talk to George about Breezing and the surprise that was to him. He says, people always say, well, George, how come you don't play the old stuff anymore? People always seem so surprised that once he started making hits, that he was honest, married to those hits and playing them all the time. And his thing was, man, I'm satisfied. I played music for 20 years. Right, right. I had hits. I made 15 years of recording. And then I made Breezing, and now I got hits. I'm good with that. Like, I'm good.
Well, it's what you said to you. Now you got to play the hits. You
got to play the hits, and he I saw a clip from him playing in LA about 3 months ago, and at 78 years old, he's still playing the hits. But you know what? He's got hits, and that's why.
Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of jazz guys have this. Like, I had Al Di Meola on the show, and he said to me, gosh. It was a trip. He said he's been very frustrated because he said, I sell out every show I do, but I'm only selling out 200 to 300 seats a time. He said, and I was in the record companies try to pair, they never gave him a shot to pair him. Kind of like what you were saying, you thought if you did this, it would expand your audience a little bit. And he always tried to get those gigs where he can get paired up with someone like Kansas or some prog band that would sort of, be a segue to a big, and he said he could never do it. And it was very frustrating. And I think that's just a thing in jazz, man. It's just really hard to find it's not the biggest audience in the world, unfortunately.
No. And someone like Al, first of all, he's a huge part of the music of my childhood, Return to Forever and all that.
That stuff was phenomenal.
And he was someone who benefited greatly from that time in early jazz fusion. When he got a taste of what it was like to be a rock star without being one, right?
Yes.
Return to Forever. They played in stadiums. I remember Lenny White would talk about they played in front of 50,000 people. I'm 20. I'm just like, you got 20. You got to be a fusion band, but that that they had a taste of that. Meanwhile, Dizzy Gillespie was playing the Blue Note. You know what I mean? So and probably the greatest living musician on the planet was playing at the Blue Note, and they were playing at Giant Stadium, wherever. So
right.
So there's
people that say the 55 club is so tiny.
Right.
There's a reason why.
There's a reason why. Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but it's the truth.
25 people in there, it's packed. You know what I mean? There you go, it's full. And that's why. And so I understand Al's frustration. I have a funny Al Di Meola story that I'll share with you.
Please.
Well, because all of us, we're all fans of Les Paul, right? And so Les used to play. Les always kept a weekly gig in New York.
Yeah, at the Blue Note. At the Blue Note.
At the Blue Note.
No, the Iridium. The Iridium.
Exactly.
I saw him. That's what I saw.
And so I think it was his 86th birthday. They were having at the Iridium a party there, and I was a Gibson artist at that time, myself and Russell Malone. And so they invited the guests were myself and Russell Slash and Al Di Meola. We all played with Les Paul. Okay. I used to go in and sit in with Les on occasion. I loved him. He was a great guy, and he was gruff and rough dude.
And you know what? He was gruff. I was there one time. I was a kid, and I said, Mr. Paul, would you please sign? I asked him. He goes, no, get out of here. I was like, okay.
Yeah. He was not known for being a sweet old guy. That's for sure.
No, he wasn't. He was all right. Sorry.
Yeah, I just and who knows what what it was that set that up. You know, we could.
Who the hell knows? And I didn't take it personal. I was just like,
somebody, maybe he just seen somebody sell a T-shirt that had his signature on it for $100. You know what I mean? Yeah, who knows?
Who knows, man? Yeah.
But I just remember going to sit at the first time I'll set it up. So the first time I went to sit in with him, I got there, and Lou Pallow, his rhythm guitar player, was an angel. He was the sweetest man on the planet. So he was the buffer, right? And so I'm there, and so I want to sit in, and Les said, he's like, all right. He says, well, we got a guy here to sit in with the band. He looks at me and it's unfortunate, but there's so much of the American guitar tradition is divided at the color lines, right? And so I'm sure Les was not used to having a young black guitar player come up and be a big fan of his and know his music. You know
what? That's really hard. That's sad, and it's almost impossible to believe because I mean, you don't have to be like
Paul, right?
I mean, you don't have to be Les Paul to just like, man, there's some good black artists out there. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of weird that he would of all. I mean, that's weird.
So I got the impression that he wasn't used to having a lot of love shown to him by young black musicians. Which is ridiculous.
Yeah, because he was like, that's nothing to do with him, not the musicians. Like no, seriously, who wants to get near a guy like that?
So I got up on stage.
You got you, like, Mr. Smile and like, hey man, let me roll up my sleeves, and then you got, so
well, it's like, anyway, he says, what do you want to play? And I says, man, can I play? I said, it's always been a dream to play How High the Moon with you.
Oh, man.
And we were, and I really was, I was just like, man, we were golden from that moment, and so
that's cool.
So he's one of those people that I feel like if you got to know him in the right in a good situation for him, then you see what a great man he was. He's a sweetheart of a guy. As someone, getting to know his career, talk about someone who invented multi-track recording and has the single most popular, signature series, instrument of all time, and all these things. And I'm sure there was a lot of situations where he was taken advantage of, and I'm sure that left him bitter in many ways. Yes,
you're probably right. I mean, all these, I can't tell you how many guys I've had on my show that have gotten a hose, especially like, baby boomers or guys that are like, I'm 58, like 10 years older than me, but they were 10 years, they were in the late 60s, mid 60s, first getting signed. They got raped. It's just disgusting.
Of course. I mean, I look on the wall behind you and when you say Fender, you say Stratocaster. When you say Gibson, you say Les Paul.
Right.
You actually
say the man's name. Yeah, that's a very good point.
Donald Trump, you know what I mean? That's how rich he should have been, and so.
Absolutely.
And so there's that, right? And so anyway, I just cut to the birthday thing, and so we're they got cameras there, they're filming the whole thing, and Slash, who was just a really nice guy. At the time, Guns N' Roses was defunct, and he was touring with the Slash's blues band.
Okay.
That was it was called Slash's Blues Band Tour, or whatever, and so he wanted to play a blues. And so we all played like a C blues with Slash, and he was great. He did his thing, and to say he's such a visual experience, he was really just trying to not be he wasn't trying to steal the show from, he just wanted to come play and sort of pay tribute to Les, which I thought was really sweet.
Yeah.
Because Gibson had made 50 limited edition Slash Les Pauls. So they were Les Pauls with Slash's head carved into the front of the guitar. So it was the hat and the hair and his face, kind of doing this.
I've had probably every one of his band members on this show, and they all said he is totally not like, he's so laid back and so humble, and he's nothing like that. Yeah.
And so he just did along for the ride, what I mean? One of the guys, so anyway, unless, if you saw him, he had everyone sitting on the stage in a row, in a straight line across the stage, and everyone had to be part of the show. So you got up on stage, you had a microphone, and I forget the comedian's name, but he was Howard Stern's, one of Howard Stern's radio co-stars.
Okay.
Was there. and he was telling rough jokes to the Broadway crowd, and it was kind of and it was one of those things it was like that you didn't want to stick out. You didn't want to be the nail that stuck out because you were going to get hit with a hammer.
Right.
Just trying to be cool, and so I'm sitting there and we played, and Russell and I played a song with Slash, we played behind Slash, we played with Les. And then as I remember it, it was like the door open and the wind machine and the smoke down the stairs and in runs Al Di Meola. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, and I'm sure that's how I remember it, right?
Right.
Al comes running in, he's got that band, his band with him, kind of like a flamenco thing.
Yeah.
He's got and all of them come in.
He's got Gumby Ortiz on the yeah.
And these are great musicians, right? The guy that plays all this stuff, and so they run it and now they're all on stage, but not realizing that Les was going to make us sit down. Oh my! Like 20 of us, just side by side, like kids in a field trip. And this is this exchanges. I hope Al sees this because I'm sure he'll laugh about it. Les says, "Well, Al, you're the new guy on stage. Why don't you pick the next song we play?" And so Al says, "Let's play Spain." And so Les Paul says, "Lady of Spain? Who plays?" and so Al says, "No, Spain. It's a Chick Corea tune." And Les says, "What's a Chick Corea?"
Oh my God. That's hilarious, man.
So Russell and I, we said to Les, hey, since Al brought his whole group, why don't we let him play the song? And those of us said, we'll jump in with him, whatever. And they started it at a tempo that was so fast. I was like, Al's got,
yeah, man, he's got one speed. Extra speed. Yeah.
And he owns that. It's like John Faddis in the up, up. It's like Al owns that. I wasn't telling you. Maybe McLaughlin and Paco could do it, but I was like, I'm not touching that.
Yeah, that's his genre.
It was amazing, right? And so they played through it, but it's a Broadway crowd, not a jazz crowd.
Right.
And so when it was over, there was a smattering of applause, and I mean, it was just Russell and I was just like, oh my God, did you hear what he just played? And the crowd was kind of like, they were. It was obviously visually impressive, but people clearly had no idea, and it was, it was so different from Les. And so over the microphone, Les says, "Well, Al, you got a hit there. They're going to be singing that all the way home."
Oh my God.
We all kind of laughed, even Al. But I mean, just like you have to remember that he's someone whose jazz career was a little bit distorted. His idea, his jazz success, because just it was a product of the time, and so it's unfortunate that he wasn't able to that he didn't get the support he needed to be able to parlay that into more, because he's one of the greatest guitarists of all time
ever. Yeah,
certainly someone who could rock the crowd. But there's something genuinely inaccessible about that music to the average person.
Yeah,
and that's probably why. What I've learned about a lot of progressive rock bands that I'm certainly fans of is that oftentimes the music they play is so put together, and they do it so well that we as jazz musicians assume they can do more. Right?
It's different.
Yeah, and sometimes when I say more, I mean that they can play even more jazz, and sometimes what they're playing is just what they can play. That's it, And I don't want to say they're intimidated by jazz guys, but certainly they don't feel any connection to So a lot of bands, even someone like Kansas, might have been like, oh, what are we gonna do with Al Di Meola? We're gonna play Carry On My Wayward Son,
Right.
and then that's it, and then go on to the next thing, and not every band is like Journey, where you got Steve Smith and Neil Schon and those guys who can play anything,
Yes.
And it's different.
And not every musician, I mean, even like, you look at a guy like B.B. King, he could play the hell out of blues, obviously. He could play some jazz. Could he get in and play like, progressive? Hell no. But he didn't want to, and he wasn't necessary.
No, it wasn't going to play bebop for you either. You know what I mean?
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
He did play me a scale once though. So I had obviously it's BB King, right? So, but I never actually talked to him. And he was playing at the Blue Note. This is late in his career. And so I went in. It was kind of a small venue for BB King, but it was late in life, and so he's playing there with his band for a whole week. And I walked up to the dressing room, and the door was open, and I knocked on the door, and he invited me in, and I sat down, and he said, and I told him who I was, and maybe he'd seen me with George. He might have mentioned he maybe recognized me for, and he said, hand me my guitar. He said, so I handed him a version of Lucille. I handed him Lucille. I got to touch it, handed it to him.
That's kind of cool, actually.
Oh, yeah. He invited me in to sit down in heaven, right? So I'm sitting there, and he played me a whole tone scale, and he said, brother, I'm working on this whole tone scale. And he played it for me, and it was, and so, and then he went downstairs and played the Thriller's Gone. You know what I mean? It's just. So what I appreciated from that was that, there are some people who limit their scope of interest to what they do. And then there are some people
Most people
who just, and never stop studying. That has nothing to do with whether or not they're going to play it that night or it's in their music. They just love music, and the idea of learning something new is intriguing, and I was inspired by that.
Yeah, that's cool, man.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure what it was that inspired him to do that, but it was one of the. I only wish that there were camera phones back then, because nobody would believe that BB King played me a whole scale.
Yeah, that's what a story, man. Mark, what were some? First of all, again, thanks for sharing all these stories. They're really cool, and I appreciate your sincerity in every one of them. What were some of the low points or dark periods you've had to deal with, and how'd you get through them?
The first real eye-opening music industry experience for me, dark one, was when I made 3 records for Warner Brothers, and then I moved over to Polygram. On the strength of the success of my first 3 records, I got a nice deal at Verve. And we were running along good. We were making roster records, and I had some success with my solo records. And then Polygram got bought by Universal. And they decided to merge Verve and Impulse, MCA. Okay. And Tommy LaPuma, who had signed me to my first record deal and produced my first record for Warner Brothers, was running MCA, running Impulse. And he now was running Verve, the new combined label. And they had me, Russell Malone, who was still playing with Diana Krall at the time, and Diana Krall was Tommy's artist. And they had just signed Kurt Rosenwinkel, and they dropped me. And so all of a sudden,
why?
They had too many guitarists. They were dropping artists. They dropped Nicholas Payton. They were consolidating, and I'd already made 4 records for Verve. Kurt was new, about to make his first one. Russell was still working with Diana Krall, and he had made a record for Tommy. Tommy was producing him, and so they were I was no one connected. And I had started working on a record for Verve under the old regime that the new guys didn't like. Tommy didn't like it, and my manager at the time was connected, was partners with the guy who was the president of Verve at the time, and they had a side project going with Herbie Hancock, a label, and so I went with them, and that essentially ended my career, my major label recording career. At the same time, I had just gotten divorced and was fighting for custody of my kids, and so.
Oh my God, dude! I've done that. That is.
Yeah, I got custody of my sons.
That's like bloodletting, man.
Oh yeah, and so I had moved. I had left Louisiana where I lived with my ex-wife. She was from there, and so I moved back to New York, and My father had Alzheimer's, and so my parents moved in with me because my mom needed help to take care of him. And then I didn't have a record deal. I got my parents living with me, and I'm fighting, and I'm flying back to Louisiana every month to spend a week with my kids. Because I couldn't do weekends. I lived in New York, they lived in Louisiana, so I worked it out where I could spend 7 days every month with him in a row. So I would go down and stay for a week. And so I was working with different people as a side band, still recording, for small. I recorded some records for Herbie Hancock's label. It was called Transparent, distributed by Sony. I did a few records for them, a couple of indie, Japanese label records and things. And I worked a lot I was still working with Jimmy Smith. So I worked with Jimmy Smith a lot. I did shows with Chris McBride and people like that. And I was, but I had a lot of commitments that I couldn't, a lot of, gigs I had to turn down so I could spend that week with my kids. And this went on for 3 years,
So listen, you got dropped by the label, divorced, fought for custody, and dealing with your dad's Alzheimer's.
Yeah, that all happened at once.
Oh my God, dude. That's like,
it was major. But I will say I had a good 9-10 year blissful run. You know what I mean? Well, everything sort of fell into place and worked well. And so
you were expecting, you're like, well, it's about time. Season's going to end sometime. Yeah.
Some people would look at that and say, well, things kind of even themselves out. The way I look at it was, I had all of this preparation. I had all of this time to build up to build up my reputation as a musician, to work, to become the kind of father and son I wanted to be, and all these things. And I was prepared for this windfall that was about for this shitstorm that was about to come out. I was prepared for it.
Yeah.
As best you could be. I was awarded custody of my sons at ages 11 and 8.
Right on, man. Good for you.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you. But then that was a whole new challenge. I got 2 preteens, what I mean? And so my dad's Alzheimer's progressed quickly at that point. And so we put him in a nursing home that was very close to where we lived, just a few blocks from here in Jersey City. Right. And my mom could kind of walk over there and see him every day. And so that was okay. And then, of course, she was in great shape. So after about a year, maybe 2 years of them being here, the kids being here, I started traveling again. Doing gigs. I was working for at the time I played at a club called the Cafe Y. I used to play there all the time in the city.
Cafe what?
Oh yeah, man.
Of course I know where that is. That's downtown, like on Sullivan Street or something like that. Exactly. Or yeah,
right on the corner of McDougal and West 30. Right there.
I know exactly where that is. Right? So that's where like Kendricks got discovered or something like that. Yeah.
So a friend of mine, a good friend, a guitar player and singer, band leader, a guy named Noam Dorman. He owned the club at that point, and we had met at the Blue Note and became friends, and so he offered me a nice salary to play there with as he featured me as the jazz guitar soloist with his cover band. They played top 40 covers, and classics, and he would bring me out as the special guest, guitar soloist, and so. There's actually a great video of George Benson sitting in with that band at the Cafe while playing my white Stratocaster, and he plays on Broadway. And he comes and he said, George, like, man, what are you doing? I said, I'm playing. And George, I never forget. I wasn't embarrassed, but I felt a little defeated. For years, George would come and see me at the Blue Note or see me at festivals and all that, and now I'm playing. At the Cafe Y, as a soloist with the car, I was like, man, but he came in and it was just the opposite. He came in, he brought people, and he's like, man, I'm so proud of you. Like, this experience will teach you how to, because he was like, man, you really figured out how to play for people. He said, man, these people in here don't know anything about jazz. They never heard of you. He said, and they love you. They hang on every note you play. And he was so proud of me seeing me do that.
Yeah.
And
the more you talk about him, superhuman being, man.
Oh, for sure. And I can't, and the timing of that was perfect because I was, I really needed to hear.
You were feeling low. I mean, God, all this shit you had to deal with. I mean, like give you a nugget, man. You just wanted just give me a hug, man.
I was grateful trust me, I was grateful for the job.
Yeah,
it was,
yeah.
Like anything else, it was a job a whole lot of people would love to have had. So Noam was great, and the guys in the band were great. I can't sing, so I literally just walked up and took guitar solos and played some guitar parts, and got paid.
Yeah.
And so I was really grateful for that. But I need to. You can't imagine, or maybe you can imagine what a great shot in the arm it was to hear that there was some musical positives to this. That I was so deep in it, I couldn't really see from a large.
Yeah.
Right, man. I just and it turned into. It really opened the door for me to really start to get to lit the fire for me to get into playing other kinds of music, and to find ways to translate my spirit for playing into other styles, and that really helped. And so I was doing that at night, and I played at a jingle house. I played the place JSS. Joel Simon had a jingle house on 19th and 6th Avenue.
There were tons of those back in the day, man.
So I played on commercials, and I wrote a few, and that was my daytime gig. And so I did that, and then I drove my kids.
So slowly things started. Do you know a guy in the city, John McCurry?
Oh, yeah.
He had a jingle house with Neil Jason, those guys, yeah.
Oh yeah. And so I got kind of into that scene. And then I started, doing some more recording. I got in, I met a guitar maker named Steve Marchioni, who made me a great arch top and some wonderful those custom made solid bodies that everybody was playing. I got 2 Strats, and all that, I polished my sound a lot during that time. I got into a more produced sound, so that I could take my record. I figured out how to kind of translate my, because my early recording career, man, Al Schmidt was recording me. So, he could take anything and make it sound amazing, and so I became known for having a really good sound. But that's because at that time, I really got into not just having a good sound here, but having good instruments and good equipment and sort of, I didn't go crazy with it, but I really got into fine tuning my sound and my ability to translate that into different styles. And it was right on time, and I learned to play all of these guitar parts for all of these songs, especially for a lot of the Police songs, having no idea that a few years later I would join Chris Botti's band and we would work with Sting.
Right.
And so, you know what I mean? So, I kept touring and making records and, little things and doing things and all that. And just every opportunity that came, I jumped at it, and I was.
So you were starting, in a sense, you started over.
For sure. Oh, it was definitely my second, it was the restart of my career, for sure.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it was starting for the first time, or for my second career, was starting the way that most guys started their first time out.
Right.
Playing in the clubs and trying different things and meeting people and working their way up. My initial career jumped out almost before I was ready. Just kind of I caught that the rise of the young lions in jazz, and I caught that and rode that wave. And for me, it was over. And so it was a long time before that sort of came around again, and I was really fortunate to have had to have been able to take advantage of these opportunities to prepare me to play different kinds of music, and then I joined Chris Botti's band in 2005, and after about 4 years of playing around the city and doing different things, and that just took it over the top.
Was Reggie Hamilton playing bass for him then?
No, so the band that I joined. He had hired a great drummer that I went to school with, a guy named Billy Kilson, who played with Bob, who was known for playing with Bob James and Sanborn and guys like that. But he was also a member of Dave Holland's quintet for years, and they won a bunch of Grammys. He was a great guy, great drummer, and like a big brother to me. We got, one of the first guys I met when I got to college, at Boston. And so it was through him that Botti was starting a new band. So he hired Kilson, then he hired me, Billy Childs on piano, and James Genus, a great bass player, plays with Herbie.
Oh, yeah.
James. And so we were Chris's quintet. We played with him for a couple of years, and then James was always back and forth because he wisely never let SNL go. So eventually Tim Lefebvre played with him at Ted.
I know Tim. He was on Tim is like everybody's like 7 steps from Tim Lefebvre, man.
Right, exactly.
Like the whole musical universe is like 7 steps from Tim Lefebvre.
Tim subbed for James at SNL and subbed for him Botti. And eventually he took the gig over when James stopped coming back out with us. And then Robert Hurst joined the band. The guy played bass with Diana Krall for years. In fact, he still lives in Atlanta. He was in the band. So the band stayed the same. And then I stayed with Botti for 8 years, I guess. And so through that time, that's
a lot of tour. He does like what, couple of like 150, 200 tours, 200 shows a year.
Yeah, and except for that, and we used to do this 4-week run at the Blue Note for Christmas and New Year's. Except for that, it was one-nighters.
Yeah.
He ran us ragged, but it was it was great, and he and I are still close friends. It was great. It was a really cushy gig. He paid well, and it just got more and more cushy as time went on.
Good.
Which was nice. Trust me, I had earned a break.
Yeah, and I don't think people unless it's like being pregnant. You can't know what going through a custody battle is like unless you've done it. It is one of the most emotionally exhausting things I've ever been through in my life, and I know it has been for you because it's just
absolutely. And people don't realize it's hard to explain that. So I was awarded custody, which meant that part of the fight was over, but the kids still lose, right? So you can never really fix the fact that all they want to do is grow up in the house with their mom and dad, and that's over.
Yeah.
And my ex and I, we didn't stay in touch or cooperate much.
Yeah, same here.
So that it was for the best given who we were, but still, once again,
I'm with you.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and so that it's a tough thing. And so, man, I tell you what. I enjoyed every bit of my comfortable ride with Botti.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Good for you, man. It was like a well earned.
And then when that was over, the kids were in college, were out of school, and it was I sort of just kind of floated around a bit, doing some playing, doing a little recording, and I finally decided what I wanted to do next, and I put together a band, and we were starting to do some touring, and the pandemic started, and so I never really got off the ground, and so I was sort of faced with the challenge of yet a third restart. Like, what do I do? And so. What a blessing, right? So I'll tell you, Terry Lynn Carrington, the great drummer, producer.
I had Terry on the show, man. She's so freaking cool, man.
Yeah.
And she's like,
she's amazing.
She's so nice. She's so straightforward, and I really dug her, man.
A great career, and at a time. Being a young woman playing the drums, except for the fact that her father was a well-known saxophone player in Boston and sort of introduced her, there was not a lot of
not a lot of women. And you know what she told me? This was really interesting, man. She said, one of the biggest changes she's made is that she said she's had to be really tough her whole life.
Yeah.
And she said, I lost a lot of my feminine side, and I've really tried over the last 10 years to allow that to come back out. I don't need to be so tough anymore. I've earned my stripes, sort of. I just thought she was so cool, very real. I just really
that's an amazing and also kind of a painful heart, sort of pulls at your heartstrings. We started school together. I've known her since 1983.
Oh, you guys went to, okay, that's so. She was like 6 years old. She had her her union card in Boston or something like that.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, she was always great. And she certainly wasn't at Berklee for very long. I think I remember seeing her for half a semester, Right. But she had to be. The deck was so stacked against her. I mean, of all the instruments for a woman to play, drums, like
in jazz,
like the most masculine, testosterone-filled, boys' club of all. Yeah. Like, bass maybe would have been like, you know what I mean? And so like, she had to be super hard.
Yeah.
And very, to hold, not only to hold her own, but to flourish and prosper the way she has, Anyway, so we were doing a week, Terry Lynn and Terry and me and Joey DiFrancesco.
Okay, keyboard player, yeah.
Playing a week at Birdland, and it had been a while since she and I had spent any time together. So we were talking and what have you. And she was saying, Mark, one of the things that people don't understand about the struggles of young women in music is that, a lot of top level professionals, band leaders, men and all that will talk about, yes, I'm sure I'll hire anyone who can do the job. She said, and that's fine. She said, a lot of them mean it. She said, but the problem is middle school band directors. She said, remember what it was like in elementary school when everybody chose instruments. You had guys playing flutes and clarinets and girls playing tubas. He said, then you get to junior high school and your middle school band director separated everyone into girl instruments and boy instruments.
That's so true.
And I was like, yeah, you're right. All the girls played flute and viola and violin and clarinet. And, oftentimes these instruments that have no future, certainly not in jazz,
Right.
And cello and bass and saxophones and trumpets and all that and drums went to the boys,
Yeah.
He said, so kind of starting there is so a young lady, a girl has to be super strong to break through all that, and very fortunate to have some support around her, just to get to high school and still play the trumpet. How many boys are going to date a girl in the 8th grade who's got a ring around her lips because she plays trumpet? They'll all make fun of her. You know what I mean?
Right.
That whole thing, and it happened, and we had this conversation at the same time that I was a guest faculty member at the Kennedy Center for the Betty Carter Jazz Ahead program. Okay. With Jason Moran. And, it's this wonderful program it's 2 weeks long every year, where they, and they take all the applicants from around the world. They fly you in, they put you up. You get a stipend while you're there. You get one-on-one lessons with this all-star jazz faculty for 2 weeks. And you do performances, coach, it's separated into 3 combos. And then when it's over, you get a grant to come to New York for 2 weeks, stay in a hotel, and money to go out and hear live music.
That's so cool.
There wasn't even one female guitar applicant for the program. I'm
not surprised.
And so neither was I, but it was a hell of a realization. Because of this conversation I had with Terry. So I remember when I got back home, I said to my youngest son, Davis, I was telling him about it, and I said, man, I'd like to find some young female jazz guitar players to mentor, or just one, and I said, but I don't even know any. And I'm older, so I'm not hanging out at jam sessions or whatever. He said, Dad, I know this young girl, a young woman. She plays guitar and she sings, but she's into jazz. And he said, she's got something, but she's got zero confidence. He said, you can tell she's insecure about it, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, send her by my gig, tell her, and so Allison Yaffe, she came, and we talked, and I said, well, listen, I just told her the story. This is the deal, and so I'd like rather than waiting around for for that chance meeting when I meet some young girl who needs, I'm actually going to make a point to do something to make a difference. So we'll, come by, get some guitar lessons. We'll get to, I'll get to know you. We'll see. And she had just lost her job and said, well, I can't afford lessons. And I remembered all those free lessons I'd gotten from people. And I was like, well, just come by and get a few. She refused. She said, but I'll be your guitar tech. She says, oh, I'll work in exchange. And I was like, wow.
Cool.
That's cool.
Yeah. That's the one you want to give free. That's the one who earned. That's the one who deserves the free lesson, right?
Right. And I was like, here's an amp and here's an extra guitar. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like it just, and so it challenged some things within myself even because, she'd come by the house and pack my stuff up and I would hold the door. You know what I mean? Or we get to the gig and all the guys are running trying to take my stuff out. She's like, I'm working. They're trying to. You don't realize just those notions of there's a young lady carrying an amplifier. I better go help her. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even that in a way attacks her confidence, right? And so I learned to challenge some very basic notions within myself about gender equality. And so. So this is going on when the pandemic starts, right? And so she had a friend, a woman named Isla Cantor, who started this program called GMI, an online Zoom-based guitar program. And Allison knew that I was flailing about like everyone else.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what to do, with all this time and how not to have my wife call me a loser, right? And so she set me up with a job teaching for GMI in this program, and while that did not, it wasn't really for me. That actual association, the idea was brilliant, and making use of this Zoom technology, and I had taught for a while at Berklee while my kids were there, and it's just so institutionalized. And so, the school has become, institutionalized is not the right word, but it's just, they have reduced the teachers to the role of sort of an insignificant intermediary. It's just the student is the customer, and the school is the product, and they've got all of that, and they charge so much money to get the customer to buy the product. The teacher is like the server. You're the waiter. Just, and so the problem is, in any teacher-student situation, if the student is the boss, then how can they be the apprentice? Right? It takes an extraordinary 18-year-old to know that they have all the power, yet completely submit to the teaching of to the words and lessons the teacher's trying to impart, because the student has all the power. Kids show up and they come to 2 lessons out of 14 and demand their money back and get a full refund. It just there was no ability. So I had a kid come in for his first lesson. He walked in the room with his guitar, and he said, now listen, dude, I don't have any interest in learning all this guitar crap you want to teach me. Can we just jam in A for 30 minutes? And he was, and I'm looking at this kid going, what?
What's weird? And I know I sound like an old man, but like, how do you have the balls to say that? And I apologize because I was like, maybe
one, like, are you
right to anyone, right? Not like
God-nosed 18-year-old kid. So he didn't know who I was clearly, but I'm
just to call a dude.
No, like I didn't. That when I enrolled at school, the teachers weren't famous. They were just, they were all great. William Levitt was still alive. The guru of the Berklee Jazz Method, and he was still. He and Larry Bayonne were the dean and assistant dean of the guitar department, a chair and assistant chair. But aside from them, the names of the teachers weren't well known. But man, they were the teachers. Like I called them sir. I said,
that's bad manners on the parents, man.
Oh, for sure.
I hate to say that, but
absolutely, yeah. The kid didn't have any better home training than that.
Yeah, man, that's
my father would have boxed my ears in, as they say. You know what I mean?
Dude, when I mentioned to you, we went to Orlando this weekend. I had such joy. Now, my kids are adults, but I had such joy seeing all three of them interact with people. And all I heard was, yes, sir, may I please? Yes, ma'am. And I was like, thank you, God. We did one thing right. That was it. If nothing else, you know,
yeah.
I mean, it's
that
like
is the absolute greatest compliment that I get about my kids is how well-mannered, nice young men they are.
And probably if you're like me, like when they were younger, you're like, my kids? Because then you're not, because maybe not so much at home.
Like who's Michael Hansen? You kidding me?
Right.
That's exactly, and they are. And I'm so proud of them for it.
Yeah.
So I was raised that way. Certainly my mom and my elder siblings played a huge part in the raising of my kids because it was a family effort,
Right.
and they benefited greatly from having all that, and despite and fighting through this era of disproportionate young person empowerment, like this idea with young people just, we're equal because we're here. I'm like,
equal is good. Entitlement, I don't have equality. I'm good with it. Entitlement.
Equality means we have the same opportunities. We should all be treated the same way.
Which also means you should earn it the same way.
The next step is, okay, so now you have the opportunity to go earn your respect. Have these accomplishments and earn your respect.
Right.
The fact equality doesn't mean you're entitled to the same respect but you have no accomplishments and you earn nothing.
Right.
And the sad part about that is once we know once you grow and mature and you've had a life of you have such a different perspective on what that respect is. Like it makes you even more humble. Like it's such a wonderful thing, You don't know, So I'm looking at this kid going, if this is like I can't do this anymore, and so that was the end of it. So I stopped teaching lessons at Berklee, and then I started. I had 4 ensembles, and I never forget. I had a student. I would see her. My ensembles were Tuesday afternoons. Tuesday was the one day I could get to Boston and teach. I usually had that day off on the road, whatever. And I remember I had a student. I would see her every Tuesday, maybe a half an hour before my ensemble across the street at Dunkin' Donuts. And yet she only made it to 3 out of 14 classes. So,
sorry, man. I'm not laughing at you. I'm like,
that's laughable.
And then she's like,
you gotta go out of your way.
I'm not getting any better. You're not a good teacher.
As a teacher, I'm not getting any better. I'm like, well, I've only seen you 3 times,
Yeah, and it's your fault, right? Yeah.
Merlin the magician to make you better with that. And so I gave her an incomplete because failing her would just mean she'd just whatever start over. But I wanted she was young and I wanted her parents to see this incomplete, and I wanted them to have to contact me through the department chairman so that they would know what happened, so that hopefully they would help straighten her out.
Yeah.
So I submitted the grade and I got an email from my department chairman, and he said her mother wants to know what's the deal with the incomplete. I said, great, give her my email address, have her contact me directly.
Sure.
So I explained what I figured. My line was, we had out of 14 weeks, I've only seen your daughter 3 times. Period. I'm like, mic drop. I'm in. Right. This is it. What the mother's response is, well, isn't there something you can do? Like, I want to see her go, progress to the next level next semester.
I guess she didn't read your email.
I was like,
that's the only thing I could possibly think.
So, I realized that took all the joy out of teaching. Right. Yeah. So now, but with this one-on-one situation where someone is, it has had to not only pay for your time, but they understand, how hard it is to make the schedule and how that, they've had to do some research to see who you are. And I'm not teaching from a book that's got, got the information here. So I'm not just an intermediary, I'm the source of the information. And I'm, and so now I've got your attention. I can actually share with you what I love about guitar and what I love about music.
Right.
And I feel that I really enjoy that. right? And so I didn't continue on with GMI, but I've started my own. In fact, we'll talk about that. I started my own.
Yeah, what is it called?
And so I'm launching the Mark Whitfield Academy. Right.
Dude, that's awesome. The Mark Whitfield Academy.
And so, we take a limited amount of students every 6 months or so. And we're gonna, I'm teaching online now, but the official Academy launch should be January 1st. And I've got my own curriculum, and it's basically teaching, my method, but what I've learned, how I learned, and what I've learned over the years, kind of all rolled up into a bunch of different lessons about ear training and comping and harmony and soloing and scales and chords and and musicality and sound and all these things, all with the personal flair is the way that I kind of just the way I do things, and that's
where I'm going to drag this out of you. Where if somebody wants to connect with you on this, where do they go?
So you could go to my website at markwhitfield.com.
That's MARK.
WHITFIELD.com. And also at Mark Whitfield, the guitarist, on Instagram.
Okay.
And I have a ton of private students that I'm maintaining until the official Academy launch, and then I'll transition everyone there. But anyone who's interested in learning from me about guitar, music, and so forth, reach out to me. We'll get something scheduled.
You can just listen to you tell stories, man. That'd be worth it. That'd be worth it right there.
Well, so I do, like I do that a fair amount, because I realize the other thing is musicians nowadays, while we have so much more, we have such an inflated, exaggerated access to information, like and footage and archival information. It's all that, there's videos and all these things and tutorials and so forth. We have very little actual interaction
with people,
with one another, and with our heroes. Even the ones that are still around, people have become less and less accessible. And it's just a sign of the times, And so I remember, much like my Jack McDuff story or my B.B. King story, I had saw Joe Pass, like I said, at Disneyland, and I saw him again in Boston while I was going to school. During my first year, he gave a master class at a local music store, and it was clear that he was a cranky old dude. Like,
Joe Pass.
Oh yeah, this dude was cranky, and I could, and looking back on it, I'm thinking Joe Pass in his 50s giving a master class at a local music store in, associated with Berklee. Like, he must have felt like
he wasn't there because he wanted to be.
Well, I'm sure he was like, what did I do wrong in my life that I have to be here doing this? And a bunch of idiots out there in the audience, And I remember somebody asked him, one of the questions was, what kind of picks you use? And he just said, next question, and somebody was like, yeah. So and someone said, well, what do you do when you find something you can't play? And he says, I play something else, like he was not having it. You know what I mean?
I play. Did you see Chappelle, the latest special?
My son told me, I haven't seen it yet. I'm waiting for my wife to come in town. We'll watch it together.
He watch it. It's funny. He says this one thing though. He goes something about what would I do if I was in Walmart with my family? And he goes, well, first of all, it would mean my entire life's aspirations have gone terribly wrong. That I'm in Walmart with my family. That's Joe Pass at that thing, man. That's what
Joe Pass at Whirlish's music store in 1980.
Yeah, that's what happened there, man.
I love Chappelle. I knew him. I've known him a long time, and so he used to. The Cafe Y has a sister comedy club right next door called the Comedy Cellar.
Yeah, it's right across the street. You walk downstairs. Yeah.
And he got his start there. I've known him for years.
That's right. That's right. All those guys. Right. That's right. Yeah.
Seinfeld, Ray Romano, they were all down there together. But yeah, so Joe Pass was playing solo guitar for We Get the Blue Note back then they used to have, they put 2 bands a night. So the first set would be a 45-minute set by 1 hour, and then so it was Joe Pass playing 45 minutes, and the George Shearing Quintet playing. So it was Joe Pass and George Shearing for 2 sets a night for a whole week. So I knew someone who said he could introduce me to Joe. Said he knew Joe Pass personally, and the guy didn't show up, but I was at the club, so I just walked in, and one of those moments, man, where I just didn't realize how brave I was being, and I knocked on Joe Pass's door, on the dressing room door, and he opened the door and looked at me like, what the, and he was talking to one of his friends, his old buddies in the dressing room, and they were dropping F-bombs, you know what I mean? It was just, man, it was 2 old Italian dudes, man. They were going at it, right? I was like watching The Sopranos, right? So, you know what I mean? So I'll save your podcast from all the swearing, but it was a lot of it, right? So, and I'm hearing this as I'm knocking, going, maybe I should unknock, right? And the door flies open. He's got a big cigar. He's like, "What the fuck do you want?" And I was like, "Oh." My name is Mark Whitfield. I'm a guitarist, and I thought maybe I would come ask you for a lesson. And I realized as I was saying it that these were all, I'm just saying this is all the word, every word is wrong. Like I just what I said. And his buddy says, "Oh, this ought to be hilarious. Let him in."
Oh my God.
So now I'm like, oh no, this couldn't go any more wrong, right? So I walk in, and he hands me his guitar. It was the Ibanez JP20, the Joe Pass model. And he handed it to me. And he says, well, he's like, I'm on my break. I'm not giving you a lesson, editing here. I'm not giving you a lesson, but play something for me. And so now I'm just like, okay, well, I'm here. So I had written a song. It sounded like a standard. I just got out of Berklee. So one of the things we had to do was compose something, and so it kind of sounded like a tune you might know, but it wasn't. And so I got through the first 6-7 bars, and he says, "What song is this?" And I said, "Oh, it's a tune I wrote." He says, "Well, how can I judge how you play if you don't play something I know? Play something I know." And so
that's a weird.
But he's like, I want to hear you interpret a song I know.
Okay.
What you're saying, right? And so he wasn't concerned with how I played the guitar. He wanted to hear how I played music. That's what I took from that, right? And so I started playing "We'll Be Together Again," the old standard. And I played through it. And he was like, "Oh yeah, you got these," And he said, "Now play me some lines." And I played some lines. He said, "Okay." He said, "Hey, you talk about you like my records, but when you play lines," he said, "it really sounds like George Benson."
Funny you should say that.
And he laughed and he said, "Yeah, but," he says, "What am I going to tell you?" He says, "You know how harmony works, you know how chords work." And I said, he said, "You got any questions?" And I said, "Well, how do you?" I said, "I'm working on playing fast tempos." He said, "Well," he said, "you can't work on playing fast tempos. You just have to play fast tempos." He's like, "Your thought process is different." He said, "Your vocabulary is your vocabulary, but you're going to have to learn how to edit it, and you can only do it by experiencing what it's like to play really fast and having to see what you can grab." He said, "Let that and figure that out. Now get out," right? And so I'm like, wow, what I thought
that was really cool.
Very cool. And then he, as I'm leaving, he says, "Stick around for the set." And so I did, I was like, well, I mean, of course I was going to stick around for the set, And so I did how the Blue Note is, you can stand on the stairs kind of and watch the show. So I'm standing on the stairs watching him play. He walked downstairs, he sat down in the chair, and the first thing he played was "We'll Be Together Again." And he played a 10-minute invention where he would play something and I'd look up at you and say, as if he was saying, "You could try this, or you could try this." And he did, and it was just this beautiful masterclass just for me.
That is so cool.
And so it's that experiences like that I like to share with students and people who want to play music, and the generosity in that. It was his, the fact that I wasn't there for, so I could say Joe Pass showed me something, or so I could put on my resume, I hung out with Joe Pass. I was there because I wanted to learn something from him. I recognized his mastery and his genius, and I wanted to learn that, and it was that genuine interest that impressed him, and I think it was that, and we became friends. And I saw him on the road a lot, and I mean, obviously, I'm one of if there's a list of his biggest fans, I'm on it.
That was really nice what he did.
But it was nice, and I realized that I had a lot of these kinds of experiences with people, and one of the things that I share with young folks is that, the way you approach someone is important, because I don't know you. Like, I have no idea who you are, but clearly I have all this stuff I'd love to share. As long as I feel like you're actually interested in it, you're welcome to all of it. Right. We were talking to Chris McBride. We were playing, Christian McBride and I were doing something with the Houston Symphony, and someone in the bass section asked if his son could take a lesson, and McBride said, "I don't do that. I don't do that." And the guy was like, kind of put off by it, and when he walked away, Christian said, "Man," he said, I got tired of doing it, because it becomes a thing where the kid just wants to say he took a lesson with Christian McBride. He has absolutely no interest in what I'm showing him, and I don't need the money. I'm just wasting my time. He said, so he says, my wife and I have a program. We have a school for kids who want to learn. Just come to New Jersey and join and get in the school. You can learn all you want. Right. I stayed with Chris McBride thing. He said, there's no benefit in that for me, so I don't bother.
So that's what people do. They just.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, if you don't value time, I mean, I don't know. I value time.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge thing. Your kid walks up and he's got his phone, takes a picture, he posts it on Instagram. He's like, I played with Mark Whitfield, you know what I mean? And it's okay. It's what it is. But
I know, but
it requires that I got to get up out of my bed and come, take a shower and go, leave the hotel and come over to the club. And just for you to do that, I Sports Center, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. No, I totally get that, man. I'm even funny, like when guys come to town, and everybody's very sweet to me. They always invite my wife and I to shows or whatever. If I take pictures, I don't even post them.
Right.
And my wife's like, well, why don't you post them? I'm like,
we're from a different generation when it's weird.
I feel like it's not a I don't want to like pimp the dude out. 90% of probably everybody would be like, no, you could post it. But I'm like, I just feel I keep it for me. It's a nice memory.
Exactly. It's that way. Sure.
Yeah. And but I get it. Yeah. That's gotta be annoying, man.
Yes. But and someone, and to be around McBride, I mean, he's literally he's like the Pied Piper of upright bass players,
Yeah.
And
he's the guy now.
He was frustrated one night. We were playing in Japan a couple of years ago, and it was this huge autograph line, and literally everybody in the line was a bass player. He was just
my God.
Although I'm sure he's proud of that. He was like, man, nobody, because aren't there any just music fans out here? And I was like, yeah, but they got trampled by all the bass players,
Yeah. And so everybody getting it. Yeah, I get it.
Polarizing your figure, for bass players and such,
Okay, so anybody interested in working with Mark, go to markwhitfield.com. Is the Academy going to have a separate website, Mark Whitfield Academy?
No, the Mark Whitfield Academy. It'll be the Mark Whitfield. It'll be markwhitfieldacademy.com.
Great, awesome.
So just reach out to me, and we'll work it out that way.
Very cool. Everybody do that. A few more questions, man. Do you have a worst gig ever story?
Yes, I worst gig ever. I was playing. The drummer in my trio had just left, and I hired a guy who wasn't quite ready, and we took the stage in Los Angeles, and he was so bad that we didn't get through all the tunes, and we had to, and some people from the record company were there, and they were just horrible.
Said, dude, stop playing those banjo chords.
Yeah. Oh God. There's nothing. I take such pride in making a situation, in creating a situation where my love of music can come through.
Yeah.
To me, that's really important to pick, to have the right tunes and have the right people, and we can all play and have this wonderful interactive experience. And to have that fail miserably, forget about who was there or why, but just to have that experience is something, and it's been more than 25 years. I'll never forget that. Just like,
it's still,
that still hurts. That's definitely the worst gig ever.
Mark, give me your top 3 Desert Island discs, just for this minute.
Sure. I gotta have Wes Montgomery's Boss Guitar. I want John Coltrane's Love Supreme, and I want George Benson's Breezin'.
Yeah, I knew that was going to come in there.
Yeah, man.
Favorite New York City food?
Pizza.
Everybody says it. It's so true.
Man, you kidding me? I grew up on Long Island, bro.
It's so good.
Vinny's Pizza on the border. Never get any better than that. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, I remember it my whole life.
Oh, one question, man. This was not on the list. I watched some videos, and I think people are going to start watching your videos, and the first thing they're going to say is, where can they get those leather pants?
Word to the wise, don't do it. Don't do it. Know when you're too old.
I was like, my man's rocking it. That's big balls now, man.
That's a long ball. Funny, and nobody ever gets to
Oh my God. Sorry, man. I just had to do that.
No, that's funny.
You earned that. Oh man, this is good. What do you like most about yourself?
For me, it's really simple. My default setting is joyful, and I love that. I realize that there is a chemical balance that works with everyone. So, and my default setting is joyful, and I'm really grateful for that.
Dude, and I think everybody who interacts with you is probably the same way. So that's really cool. It feels just as grateful. That's a good answer. Like I said, I've never just looked at a picture and said, man, that guy is like happiest dude on earth. I didn't even know you. I said, I got to meet that guy. He's just like, I just wanted to be like, throw a little of that this way, man. That was like, so that's a true statement. Tell me something you want that you don't have now. Could be tangible or it could be a mindset, whatever.
Sure. I really want to make a large ensemble recording with that embodies the spirit of jazz and the soul of the 70s. I want that more than anything, and I'm working on it now, and hopefully that's something that will come to fruition for next year.
And if anybody listening to this is in a position to throw some money at that, make that happen, connect with Mark.
Hey, that's awesome.
Just putting that out there, man. You never know, right? You don't put it out there, you don't get. Most important thing your dad taught you?
Be the kind of man you don't have to apologize for.
That's good, man. I like that. Dude, you're a great interview, man. Super articulate, man. You're awesome to talk to.
Good question. So it makes it easy. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Say it again. Be the kind of man. I like that.
Be the kind of man you don't have to apologize for.
Yeah. And how about your mom? What's the most important thing she taught you?
Be honest with yourself.
Yeah, amen on that, man. There's a bit of a scarcity of that.
Yes, indeed.
You have any hobbies outside of music?
Skateboarding.
Yeah,
I've been doing that since I was a kid, man.
Wow.
So I'm staying now. At my age now, I'm more of a longboarder. There are no tricks, but I love it. I still do it all. If I'm going to do it when we get done today, I'm going to go for a ride.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
Favorite place you traveled?
I still love going to Japan. Yeah, still my favorite place to travel to. And Barcelona Spain is a close second.
toughest decision you had to make or most difficult thing you had to do?
Oh, getting divorced. Yeah, that was, well, even tougher than that was to pull the trigger on starting a custody battle. Because it's for a man, it's such an uphill battle.
Back then, especially, I went through mine.
What did me at 96? Yeah, geez.
Mine was 90, I think 92 or 93. It was,
yeah, so it was unheard of, and so that it was tough. I think that's probably the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, that is.
And certainly the toughest decision I've ever made.
And last question, man. Thank you for everything. I really appreciate you. Biggest change in your personality in the last 10 years, and how much of that change is intentional and how much is just a natural part of aging?
I've always been relatively charming, and the deception in that is that the first person I charm every day is myself.
Hey, well, if you don't believe, right?
You know what I mean? I over the last 10 years, and even more so as a result, function of coming through the pandemic and having just a lot of soul searching time, to focus on doing and embodying the kinds of things that require less charm.
What do you mean by that?
So there's a lot less salesmanship that goes into the things that I do. But what I mean by that is the need for it. So if the projects that I'm involved in, the attitudes that I'm conveying, the energy that I'm bringing to a situation, or the situation that I'm involved in, is really what I should be doing or want to be doing or desire to be doing, it doesn't need to be convincing. There's a lot less convincing that needs to go into it.
Man, you know what? A buddy of mine helped me with something with that. And he said, what did he say? He said, he said, I'm not part of the results committee. And I always used to say in business, I'm not in the convincing business. But now I do it with purpose. I think this is what you're saying. If I'm not looking for opportunities, I'm looking for opportunities that mean something to me.
Absolutely. It's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's really changes your life. It has changed mine. And it sounds like you're saying it's really different when you do that. Cause and I'm the same way. If it doesn't come natural, I don't push anything anymore. Yeah. It's a lot. The weight on your shoulders is immensely much lighter for me anyway.
Well, and I think general truth. The harder that I have to work at selling an idea or put the first, it's doomed. It's dead in the water for sure. It's doomed to fail. And then you can just, and if you refuse to accept that, then it's on you for how much energy and effort you want to sink into it. You see it, if it's not taking off, it's not taking off. Move on. There's another idea.
Next, I know, totally.
And if you don't, and you'll miss all the things you could have been doing, by being completely obsessively focused on this one thing.
Yeah, being willful serves a purpose at a point in time, but then it serves a disservice at another point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. I'm totally with you on that, man. Right on. Any final words of wisdom before I tell people where to find you?
That's it. I think I got it. I shared it all.
Thank you for everything, man. I really appreciate your time. I'd love to connect with you in person someday. If you're down here, if I'm in the city, I'll be looking you up if you're playing.
And I intend to impose on you when I come your way.
Great. Talk about, you got GBD, this project coming up with Robert Hurst and Jeff Watts.
Yes.
Talk about that.
I made a recording for my first Verve recording in 1994 called True Blue with the then members of the Tonight Show band, which is just Branford Marsalis and his group. It was Branford Marsalis, Kenny Kirkland, Jeff Watts, and Rodney Whitaker. Robert Hurst wasn't available, but Robert Hurst and Jeff Watts are two of the greatest musicians in their respective disciplines of all time, and they have a very unique sound and an interest and a unique approach to playing. They are, and so a dream of mine was to play just trio with the two of them, and they're also two of the funniest people. I call Bob Hurst Big Pun. He's just the king of puns, right? And Jeff, between he and Tane, everybody calls Jeff Watts Tane. Between Bob and Tane, they are two of the funniest people. And so that when we were recording, the name of the record is GBD. You would think it should stand for guitar, bass, and drums, like OGD, organ, guitar, drums, Jimmy Smith, And Bob Hurst says, no, man, it stands for golden, brown, and delicious. So that's
that's great.
We're golden, brown, and delicious. That's GBD.
That's awesome. And that's coming out after the first of the year?
It'll come out after the first, yeah.
And people can find that on your website, on your socials, which is on Instagram. It's Mark Whitfield Guitarist. Again, it's MARK Whitfield, WHITFIELD, and markwhitfield.com. Also, if you are interested in working with Mark as a teacher or just learning how he does some of the things he does on guitar, his philosophy about guitar, or about business in music, hit him up on markwhitfield.com. After the first will be markwhitfieldacademy.com. Anything else, man? Is there anything else I could sell or pimp from you, or what? How can I pay it forward to you here, man?
We covered it all. I just appreciate the love, man. I'm glad we got to spend some time together today. That's awesome.
Thank you very much for everything, man. And I hope to see you. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this, please share it on your social media channels. We appreciate your support. Thanks very much to Mark Whitfield for all his time, sincerity, and candor, and just being a funny, really good guy. And again, go to markwhitfield.com on Instagram, Mark Whitfield Guitarist. Check out Golden, Brown, and Delicious, or GBD, after the first of the year. And check out Mark's catalog. He's got 16 records, man. There's a lot of great stuff in there. And most important, remember that happiness is a choice. So choose wisely. Be nice. Right on, right? Be nice. Go play your guitar and have fun. Till next time, peace and love, everybody. That's like my Don Cornelius thing. Peace and love, everybody. I'm out. Thank you, brother.